People don't want the truth. They want comfort dressed as honesty. And the ones who understand this rule the ones who don't. In the next 3 hours, we're diving into the cold, brilliant mind of Niccolo Machiavelli, a man who didn't just study power, but weaponized it. His strategies have shaped kings, CEOs, and manipulators for over 500 years. If you've ever felt outplayed, overlooked, or underestimated, this is your map to turning the tables. If this is your first time on our channel, hit subscribe and comment below which philosopher you want us to uncover next. Appear honest, but never be fully transparent. At first glance, this might sound deceptive or manipulative, but it's a principle rooted in centuries of human behavior, power dynamics, and strategic thinking. Machiavelli understood one central truth about people. They respond more to appearances than to reality. In The Prince, he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And therein lies the leverage. To appear honest is to wear a mask that signals trustworthiness, morality, and integrity. It allows people to relax their guard, to open their minds, and most importantly, to lower their defenses. People crave certainty. They long to believe that someone, somewhere, is telling them the truth. And when you give them just enough of that appearance, they give you access to their loyalty, their secrets, and their influence. But here's the twist Machiavelli emphasized. Once you've given them the appearance, you must never reveal your full hand. Why? Because full transparency is vulnerability. Once someone knows your full thinking, your real motivations, your limits, your weaknesses, they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can control you. Transparency is not strength. It's an open door for manipulation. Machiavelli warned against letting others see the inner gears of your mind because power lies in mystery, in ambiguity, in the pause between what people think they know and what they can't quite grasp. Think of how this plays out in modern life. A politician gives carefully measured interviews, appearing candid while avoiding real answers. A CEO gives a vulnerable speech about failure, but only shares a story that casts them as ultimately wise and heroic. Even in personal relationships, people instinctively present a curated version of themselves, honest enough to be likable, guarded enough to stay safe. This isn't just manipulation, it's survival. The strategy, then, is to reveal just enough. Give people a version of yourself that aligns with what they want to believe. Use minor admissions of weakness to appear authentic. Offer truths that are harmless or even endearing, while protecting the truths that give away your position. If people think you're honest, they stop questioning. They trust your motives, and that trust, once earned, becomes a tool of immense influence. But beware, this isn't about lying. A habitual liar is eventually discovered and discarded. The true Machiavellian approach is more elegant. It's about withholding without looking evasive. It's about knowing when to speak, when to nod, and when to let silence do the work. Honesty is a currency. Spend it wisely, sparingly, and always with a return in mind. The brilliance of this strategy lies in its flexibility. In times of conflict, it can shield you. In negotiations, it gives you leverage. In leadership, it builds a loyal following who believe they know you. And in manipulation, it's the bait that makes every trap look like an open hand. To appear honest but never be fully transparent is not about deceit. It's about control. The kind of control that allows you to move in silence, while others show their cards. It's a Machiavellian truth. Authenticity is power, but the illusion of authenticity is even stronger. Create dependence. Make others need you. This is one of Machiavelli's most powerful and enduring strategies, because it doesn't just influence people, it traps them. Once someone needs you, they no longer evaluate you on merit, morality, or even trust. They tolerate you. They serve you. They protect your position out of fear of losing their own stability. Machiavelli observed that real power doesn't come from force alone. It comes from control over access. If you become the gatekeeper to what others want or need, you control their actions without ever raising your voice. And in The Prince, he advised rulers to ensure that their subjects could not do well without them. Dependence, he argued, was stronger than loyalty. To use this strategy, you must first identify what people crave: security, approval, opportunity, protection, or belonging. Once you know what drives them, position yourself as the provider of that thing. Be the one who writes the recommendation. Be the one who opens the door to promotions, to influence, to status. But never give it all at once. Create a drip. Keep them returning to the well. This principle is everywhere, if you look for it. The employer who makes himself indispensable by being the only one who understands a certain system. The romantic partner who becomes the emotional anchor, ensuring the other can't imagine life without them. The political figure who provides handouts or favors only when support is shown. It's not just about helping people. It's about helping them just enough that they can't imagine functioning without you. Machiavellian dependence doesn't mean kindness. It means positioning. A master manipulator doesn't just offer value. They offer selective value with strings attached. A good strategist builds systems where others' success relies on their approval, their expertise, or their protection. And when that reliance deepens, so does the control. It's no longer about persuasion. It becomes structural influence. One subtle way to build dependence is through emotional leverage. Offer validation, praise, or support that others begin to crave. Once they associate you with confidence or comfort, they will seek your presence not just for strategy, but for emotional survival. Cut it off and they panic. Reward it, and they chase. This dynamic often appears in workplace hierarchies, manipulative friendships, and even family systems. But there's another layer. By making others need you, you also make yourself less replaceable. If you're just talented, someone else can match that. But if you're needed, if you're a cornerstone in their mental, emotional, or financial framework, you become irreplaceable even if others are more qualified. That's the quiet genius of this philosophy. It doesn't demand that you be the best. It demands that you be the most necessary. Dependency creates obedience. People who rely on you will rationalize your flaws. They'll excuse your decisions. They'll defend you not because they believe in you, but because they can't afford not to. That's power. So while others are out there trying to be liked or admired, the Machiavellian mind focuses on something deeper: control through necessity. Create systems, relationships, and environments where your absence becomes more terrifying than your presence. When others need you more than you need them, you no longer have to demand respect. It's built into the design. Control perception to control reality. This isn't just strategy. It's psychological warfare. Machiavelli understood that what people believe is often more powerful than what is. Reality is filtered through human perception, which is emotional, flawed, and easily manipulated. If you control the lens through which people see the world, you don't need to change the facts. You just need to shape the story. People rarely act on truth. They act on the version of truth that feels real to them. And that version is built from appearances, rumors, body language, tone, symbols, and narratives. Machiavelli saw perception not as a byproduct of power, but as a foundation of it. In The Prince, he argued that it is far more important to appear virtuous, generous, or just than to actually be those things. Why? Because people don't investigate. They assume. They react. They fill in gaps with their own biases. The powerful exploit this. They stage performances, not policies. They speak in absolutes, not nuances. They use symbols, uniforms, flags, titles, gestures to create a visual language of authority. They know that fear, awe, and admiration don't come from truth. They come from how the truth is presented. Take leaders, for example. A calm, confident tone during a crisis can create the illusion of control, even if the situation is in chaos. A display of generosity, when timed correctly, can erase years of selfishness in the public's mind. The key is consistency. If you control how people see you, eventually they will forget to question who you really are. Machiavellian thinkers don't let facts speak for themselves. They sculpt the narrative. If they fail, they blame someone else, publicly, immediately, and convincingly. If they succeed, they magnify the achievement. If they're caught, they redirect attention. Perception is managed like a stage. Lights where you want focus, shadows where you want concealment. Even in personal life, this principle rules. A confident posture, steady eye contact, well-chosen words, these control how people perceive you. If you act like you know what you're doing, most people will believe you. If you present yourself as calm in a storm, people will anchor to your composure, even if internally you're unraveling. Control their perception, and you guide their emotional response. This is also why image destruction is such a powerful weapon. Ruin someone's perceived character, and it won't matter what they actually did. If enough people believe they are weak, corrupt, or foolish, they will be treated as such. Their power evaporates. Machiavelli warned that rulers must guard their reputation more than their castle, because perception often determines survival. Controlling perception doesn't mean lying all the time. It means knowing which truths to emphasize, how to frame them, and when to speak them. It means understanding that silence can be louder than explanation, and that mystery can create more authority than clarity. The one who controls how others see the world becomes the architect of their behavior. They act as you've trained them to act. They believe what you've rehearsed them to believe. That's not illusion, that's influence. And it's how reality itself is bent, quietly, in your favor. Attack only when victory is certain. This is one of the most calculating and unforgiving strategies in Machiavellian thinking. It rejects emotion. It rejects impulse. It replaces both with cold timing and precision. Machiavelli knew that power isn't gained by acting fast. It's gained by acting correctly. Attacking too early invites resistance. Attacking without certainty invites destruction. But when you wait for the exact moment, when your opponent is weak, isolated, or overconfident, your victory becomes inevitable. In The Prince, Machiavelli doesn't glorify courage for its own sake. He praises caution disguised as confidence. His ideal leader isn't the one who takes every opportunity, but the one who knows when to wait. Because to act without certainty is to gamble, and true power is never left to chance. This strategy demands surveillance. You must learn to observe with patience. You must know your target's patterns, weaknesses, alliances, and blind spots. You must understand the terrain, social, emotional, political. It's not enough to want to win. You must remove the possibility of losing. Machiavelli would argue that the most dangerous enemy is not the one who's strong. It's the one who still has options. So your job is to strip those away. This doesn't just apply to war or politics. It applies to relationships, careers, and influence. A smart professional doesn't challenge a superior until they've built enough support behind the scenes. A master manipulator doesn't confront someone when tensions are high. They wait until the room is on their side. Even in social dynamics, people with power understand the value of striking only when they hold every advantage. when the narrative favors them, when the opposition is disorganized, and when public opinion has shifted. And when that moment comes, you don't hesitate. The Machiavellian attack is swift, decisive, and final. There is no warning, no build-up, because hesitation creates questions, and questions create resistance. But certainty, the cold, clinical kind, commands obedience. But here's the twist. Waiting for certainty doesn't mean inaction. It means quiet preparation. You build alliances in the dark. You weaken opponents through influence, not confrontation. You sow doubt among their supporters. You isolate them subtly, until by the time you make your move, they have nowhere left to run. Machiavelli also knew that failed attacks don't just damage your position, they embolden your enemies. A failed strike makes you look weak. It invites counterattacks. It turns fear into mockery. And fear, once lost, is nearly impossible to reclaim. That's why he warned rulers to destroy threats completely, or not touch them at all. Half measures are fatal, and mercy in this context is merely postponed risk. This strategy is ruthless, yes, but it's also logical. In a world where reputation, perception, and dominance are currency, you don't risk everything for a maybe. You strike only when the outcome is already decided, when you've written the ending before you make the move. That's not cowardice, that's control. The kind of control that makes your success look effortless, when in truth, it was engineered from the start. Divide and rule. Turn allies into rivals. This is one of the oldest and most effective tactics of control, and Machiavelli didn't just understand it, he mastered it. The core of the strategy is simple. People are easier to dominate when they're too busy fighting each other to challenge you. Unity among others is a threat. Division is your shield. When allies distrust one another, when rivals compete for your favor, your own position becomes untouchable. In The Prince, Machiavelli warns rulers never to allow powerful factions to unite against them. Instead, he advises creating tension, rivalry, and subtle conflict within groups, especially those that could otherwise become dangerous if aligned. The key is subtlety. You don't shout war. You plant seeds. You offer different rewards, whisper conflicting praise, and let suspicion do the rest. This tactic thrives in any hierarchical system: governments, corporations, military commands, even families. Wherever loyalty and hierarchy exist, division can be weaponized. Let's say you lead a team. If two of your most ambitious members become close allies, they may eventually challenge your authority. But if you subtly reward one more than the other, praise them in front of the group, give them access to something exclusive, the other begins to feel threatened. Resentment brews, and instead of focusing their energy on challenging you, they turn it inward, against each other. Once rivals compete for your approval, you gain leverage. You don't need to command with force. You command by scarcity. Your time, your praise, your decisions become the battlefield. Each one craves your validation. Each one fears being outpaced by the other. This dependency keeps you in the center of power, the calm eye of a storm you created. Even better, when conflicts arise among your subordinates or allies, they will naturally come to you for resolution. You become not just the authority, but the arbitrator, the person who holds the key to peace. This doubles your influence. They don't just need your leadership, they need your judgment. Your silence becomes a statement. Your presence becomes strategic. And as long as the factions stay fragmented, you stay protected. But it's important to avoid open chaos. Too much division and the entire structure collapses. The strategy works best when the conflict simmers just below the surface, enough to prevent alliances, not enough to spark mutiny. That's why a skilled manipulator never creates division with accusations or orders. they use suggestion. A well-placed compliment, a selective omission, a tiny shift in loyalty. Machiavelli knew that power isn't maintained by uniting everyone under one flag. It's maintained by ensuring that no one becomes strong enough to tear that flag down. You don't need allies who are friends with each other. You need allies who fear losing your favor more than they want to band together. When people are isolated, insecure, and suspicious of each other, they cling to the one thing they trust, the hand that feeds them. So while others try to build harmony, the Machiavellian mind builds competition. Not loud, not obvious, but constant. Because when people are divided, you don't need to force loyalty. They chain themselves to you, not out of love, out of fear that the person beside them might get ahead, and that fear is a throne no rebellion can reach. Be feared when you can't be loved. This principle is one of the most debated and most misunderstood ideas in Machiavelli's The Prince. But it remains brutally effective. At its core, it's not a call to cruelty. It's a call to reliability. Machiavelli wasn't saying that fear is better than love in all cases. He was saying that if you have to choose, if circumstances force your hand, fear is the safer, more predictable form of control. Love is voluntary. It is soft, emotional, and subject to change. People who love you may still betray you when it suits them, but fear, real fear, creates caution. It creates hesitation. It creates obedience. And obedience keeps power intact. Now, fear doesn't mean terror. It doesn't mean rage or abuse. It means respect that carries weight, authority that cannot be questioned without consequences. A leader who is feared is not one who is hated, but one whose lines cannot be crossed. Machiavelli advised that if a ruler cannot be both loved and feared, then fear, without hate, is the superior path. And this is key, without hate. So how do you walk that razor-thin line? You do it by creating consistent consequences. When people disobey you, there must be immediate, visible response. Not out of revenge, but out of principle. People may not agree with your actions, but they must believe you mean them. That belief becomes the barrier. It keeps others in line even when your back is turned. The unpredictability of emotion, of love, is replaced by the stability of fear. This concept plays out in every power structure. In workplaces, employees respect the manager who sets boundaries and enforces them, even if they find them cold. In politics, citizens are more likely to follow a firm leader than a friendly one who wavers. In personal relationships, too, this shows up. People are drawn to those who aren't afraid to say no, to walk away, or to make others uncomfortable when necessary. That kind of fear breeds respect. But timing and presentation matter. You don't lead with fear. You lead with clarity. You make your values known. You enforce them without apology. You show strength not through loudness, but through refusal to bend. When kindness works, use it. But when you sense that people are beginning to exploit that kindness, cut it off sharply. That's when fear becomes your shield. Machiavelli also understood that people remember punishment more vividly than reward. A single moment of firm retaliation can do more to establish your authority than months of leniency. It's not about being a tyrant. It's about never allowing yourself to be seen as weak. Because once you are seen as soft, manipulable, or easy to sway, you become prey to those more ruthless than you. So when love isn't available, when admiration can't be earned, don't chase it. Command respect instead. Let others know, through your presence and your principles, that betrayal will cost more than it's worth. That disappointment will not be met with silence. That your tolerance has limits, and those limits are sharp. In Machiavellian terms, it's better to be feared with stability then loved into irrelevance. Fear, if calculated and controlled, becomes the armor that admiration can't pierce. Never outshine the master until it's time to replace him. This principle may seem like simple flattery or ego management, but at its core, it is about survival in systems of power. Machiavelli understood that no one, no matter how wise or confident, enjoys being made to feel inferior, especially by someone beneath them. Ambition, when shown too soon, doesn't inspire. It threatens. And when people feel threatened, they move to eliminate the source of that threat. That's why the most dangerous move in politics, business, or court is to rise too quickly, too obviously, and too brightly, before the timing is right. The master, whether a boss, a political leader, or even a mentor, often sees themselves as the gatekeeper. Their status, their identity, is tied to being the authority figure. When someone beneath them begins to gather admiration, ideas, or influence that rivals their own, their instincts kick in, not to mentor, but to suppress. You may think that being impressive will win favor, but it often produces fear, not of what you are, but what you might become. The Machiavellian strategist knows how to dim their light on purpose. You must master the art of subtlety. Hide your capabilities behind humility. Let others believe they are guiding you, while quietly gathering your own tools. Give credit upward, even when it belongs to you. Feed the master's ego so it blinds him to your progress. This isn't submission, it's concealment. A disguise worn until the moment is right. The paradox here is that people who crave power often need to be needed, so let them feel superior. Let them feel essential. Let them think they are shaping you. Because the more secure they feel in their dominance, the less they'll notice your silent rise. And by the time they do notice, it will be too late. But there is a moment when the strategy must shift, when the master begins to falter, when public support wanes, when alliances fracture, when mistakes are made. That's the time to step forward, quietly at first, then confidently. At this point, your competence should already be known. Others will start looking to you for answers, not out of rebellion, but out of need. You don't take the throne, it's offered to you. Machiavelli would argue that the ideal transition of power is one that seems natural, almost inevitable, not a coup, but a correction. If you've played the part correctly, stayed just helpful enough, just humble enough, your ascent will be seen not as betrayal, but as rescue. You're not the challenger, you're the solution. That is the genius of the tactic. Timing is everything. If you outshine the master too soon, you'll be cast into exile, ruined, or forgotten. But if you do it too late, someone else may seize the window of opportunity first. The balance lies in watching carefully for the signs of decline, then stepping in not with ambition, but with certainty, not as the replacement, but as the successor they secretly prepared. In the Machiavellian world, brilliance is not just about being exceptional. It's about being strategically exceptional. You shine only when it's safe, or when you're ready to take everything. Promise everything, deliver only when useful. This Machiavellian strategy is not about lying outright. It's about mastering the art of controlled expectation. Niccolo Machiavelli understood that people are far more moved by hope than by facts. A promise is a tool of influence because it plays to the future, to dreams, to the emotional wants of others. And in a world where perception governs reality, the promise itself can be more valuable than the delivery. Humans are wired to respond to anticipation. Whether it's in politics, relationships, or business, promises offer people a sense of direction, assurance, and purpose. Machiavelli saw this as leverage. When you promise, you're not giving anything away. You're buying time, building alliances, and shaping perceptions. And as long as people believe in your future intentions, they'll remain loyal, patient, even obedient. The brilliance of this technique lies in the fact that you haven't yet done anything, but others are already reacting as if you have. But why not deliver? Why withhold? Because delivery costs power. When you give people what they want too early or too freely, their desire fades. Their dependence on you weakens. They begin to look elsewhere. That's why Machiavellian strategy favors withholding, delivering only when it serves a strategic function. The promise buys loyalty. The fulfillment, if given at all, must purchase something greater in return. Think of how this plays out in leadership. A political figure promises reform, change, or justice. Support builds, not based on outcomes, but on belief. When the timing is right, say just before re-election or during a crisis, a carefully timed delivery of that promise reinforces their power, not because of what was achieved, but because of how it felt to those watching. It's not about consistency, it's about calculation. In business, managers and executives use this to manage teams. Promises of promotion, advancement, or recognition keep employees motivated, even if the rewards are slow to arrive. The belief that something is coming sustains productivity. If those rewards are handed out too easily, they lose motivational value. But if they're given only when truly necessary, when morale dips, or when loyalty must be secured, they become far more effective. The key is credibility. Machiavelli never advocated for reckless dishonesty. A promise must be believable. It must sound sincere. It must fit your character. People don't follow promises alone. They follow people they think will honor them. You must be seen as capable, trustworthy, and generous, even if your strategy is rooted in delay. This is why appearance is everything. Your reputation does the work of convincing others that your promises will one day materialize. But the moment a promise is fulfilled without benefit to you, you've weakened your position. The trick is to make delivery feel like a gift, not an obligation, a reward, not a debt. And when someone expects too much, too soon, redirect, reframe. Offer another promise that pushes the horizon further out. People rarely revolt over delayed promises. They revolt over denied ones. As long as belief is alive, power remains intact. To promise everything and deliver only when useful is not to be dishonest. It is to be strategic with your influence. In Machiavellian terms, it's not about what you give. It's about how long you can make them want it. Use morality as a weapon, not a guideline. Machiavelli understood that morality, when used as a rigid rulebook, limits your options. It binds you to ideals, not outcomes. But when morality is used as a tool, a performance, a mask, it becomes one of the most powerful forms of manipulation available. People crave moral clarity. They want to believe in good and evil, right and wrong, heroes and villains. And the Machiavellian mind understands that whoever defines the moral landscape controls the battlefield. The average person seeks to follow morality, but the strategist seeks to frame it. Machiavelli warned against being overly virtuous if it meant sacrificing your position. Instead, he suggested that a prince should appear moral, honest, loyal, generous, while acting with complete flexibility behind the scenes. Morality becomes a costume, one you wear to win public favor, disarm critics, and rally support. But it should never dictate your actual decisions. Why? Because moral rigidity is predictable, and predictability is weakness. If people know you will always do the right thing, they can trap you, manipulate you, and outmaneuver you. But if you seem moral while secretly bending the rules, you retain both your power and your reputation. It's not hypocrisy. It's strategy. In politics, in leadership, even in personal dynamics, the appearance of virtue often matters more than its substance. Consider how moral outrage is used in modern power struggles. A leader accuses an opponent of corruption, not necessarily because they care about ethics, but because it creates a moral high ground. The public aligns with whoever seems more righteous. If you can label someone immoral, you don't need to prove they're wrong. You only need to paint them as unworthy. That's the weaponization of morality. Religious figures, politicians, activists, many use moral language not just to guide people, but to control them. Phrases like right side of history, family values, or social justice are charged with emotion and meaning, but often serve a larger strategic purpose: to polarize, to rally, to dominate a narrative. And if you stand on that moral platform, you can justify nearly any action as necessary, even cruel ones. Because now, you're not just acting, you're protecting virtue. The brilliance of this tactic lies in how it shifts the burden. If you control the moral narrative, your enemies must defend themselves on your terms. They must prove they are not evil, not selfish, not dangerous. This weakens their position because they're now reacting instead of attacking. Meanwhile, you maintain your image as the noble protector, even if your hands are far from clean. But beware, this strategy only works if your moral mask is convincing. You must speak the language fluently, show public compassion, be seen helping others, make small, visible sacrifices. These gestures build your moral credibility, allowing you to strike with minimal resistance. And when people trust your intentions, they stop questioning your methods. In Machiavellian thinking, morality is not sacred. It's tactical, a stage from which to shape perception, justify action, and discredit opposition. Don't follow it blindly, wield it boldly, because when morality becomes your weapon, it blinds others while lighting your path to power. Keep your hands clean by using others. This principle is the art of power without exposure. Machiavelli understood that direct action often carries consequences, resentment, blame, or visible guilt. But when someone else carries out the dirty work, your influence remains intact and your reputation untouched. The true strategist never stains their own name. Instead, they orchestrate events from a distance, letting others deliver the blow, enforce the rule, or absorb the backlash. In The Prince, Machiavelli offers an example of a newly appointed ruler who used a cruel subordinate to implement harsh reforms in a newly conquered territory. Once the people began to despise the cruelty, the prince had the subordinate executed, appearing as a just and compassionate leader in the eyes of the people. The lesson? Use others as instruments of control and discard them once their usefulness has expired. This tactic works because people are emotional and they personalize power. They attach blame to faces and names. If you are the face of pain, punishment, or betrayal, you become the target. But if a subordinate delivers the blow while you remain in the background, you become the mediator, the reformer, or even the hero who restores balance. You keep influence without paying the cost of enforcement. Look at modern politics. Leaders rarely fire people themselves. They have their aides deliver the message. Corporate CEOs don't directly lay off thousands. They delegate the task to HR directors. Even in social dynamics, influential people will often use a friend to deliver uncomfortable truths or make threats on their behalf. The message lands. The damage is done. But the source appears distant, even benevolent. This approach isn't about cowardice, it's about efficiency. You conserve your moral capital, you retain plausible deniability, and you create a buffer between your authority and public consequence. When done correctly, this method also creates dependency. Those who do your bidding become entangled in your plans. They fear exposure. They rely on your protection. In turn, they become loyal, even if out of necessity, not trust. But discretion is everything. You must choose the right agents, those who are ambitious enough to act, but not powerful enough to threaten you. They must believe they are carrying out their own will, even as you subtly direct them. This maintains the illusion of autonomy, which prevents them from turning against you prematurely. Another layer of this strategy is narrative control. You can distance yourself from unpopular actions while taking credit for the positive outcomes they produce. It was their decision, you might say, when criticized. But when the dust settles and success is in the air, you step in to guide or correct the course, winning admiration for your fairness or insight. The Machiavellian master never acts out of impulse. They pull strings, not triggers. They create movements without stepping onto the battlefield. The less you are seen executing power, the more others assume it flows naturally from you, and the less you are blamed when things go wrong. To keep your hands clean is not to avoid action. It's to act through design, through distance, and through others. You remain untouchable, even as your influence touches everything. Give people an enemy, then offer to defeat it. This is one of the most psychologically potent strategies in Machiavellian philosophy. People are wired to seek conflict and resolution. They want stories, villains, and saviors. They want to understand their suffering in terms of a struggle, someone to blame, and someone to trust to end the chaos. If you provide both, you don't just win their attention, you win their allegiance. Machiavelli recognized that fear unites people more powerfully than hope. An external enemy gives people focus, urgency, and a reason to band together under leadership. But the brilliance of this tactic lies in controlling both sides of the narrative. When you identify the enemy, whether real, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated, you become the source of clarity in confusion. And when you position yourself as the only one capable of defeating that enemy, you become indispensable. Politicians use this strategy constantly. They paint a picture of a nation in peril, whether from immigrants, elites, foreign governments, or internal corruption, and then present themselves as the warrior or reformer who will restore order. The enemy may shift, but the tactic remains the same: define the threat, stir fear and anger, then offer yourself as the cure. This creates emotional dependency. People feel that without you, the threat will win. This tactic also works on a smaller scale. In business, a leader may highlight a competitor or internal inefficiency as the enemy of progress, then frame their own leadership as the solution. In relationships, manipulators sometimes invent crises or amplify threats to appear protective. They're out to get you, they imply. But I'm here, I'll protect you. The illusion of safety strengthens the bond and increases control. There's a darker version of this strategy as well: creating the enemy yourself. You can fabricate division, tension, or chaos behind the scenes, then emerge as the calm, commanding force to resolve it. Machiavelli noted that princes could gain loyalty by quelling disorders they themselves helped to create. If no real enemy exists, invent one. An imagined threat can be just as powerful, sometimes more, than a real one, because you control its shape, size, and lifespan. The key to success here is timing and emotional precision. The enemy must be believable enough to evoke emotion, but vague enough that only you appear equipped to handle it. If the enemy is too small, no one cares. Too large, and people lose hope. You must strike the perfect balance: enough fear to create urgency, enough of promise to inspire faith in you. And once the enemy is defeated, you gain something even more valuable than praise: myth. You become the one who stood tall when others froze, the protector, the answer. And even if the enemy returns, or was never truly gone, you've already etched your role in people's minds. Machiavelli didn't believe in waiting for crisis. He believed in using it, and in many cases creating it. Because once you give people something to fear and offer yourself as the one to face it, they will follow you, not because they understand the truth, but because you gave them a story where you were the hero. Act fast, explain later. This strategy is rooted in the understanding that action creates momentum, while explanation invites resistance. Machiavelli knew that power often comes not from being right, but from being first. The one who acts decisively takes control of the situation before others even know what's happening. And by the time they begin asking questions, the new reality is already in place. When you act quickly, whether in politics, business, or personal dealings, you catch people off guard. Decisions made at speed can bypass layers of bureaucracy, moral debate, or emotional hesitation. Most people freeze in moments of uncertainty. They hesitate, weigh options, second guess. But if you move decisively, with purpose and authority, you appear to know what others do not. You take the dominant role by default. Machiavelli advised rulers to seize opportunities immediately. Delay creates a vacuum. One others will fill. But fast action signals certainty, and certainty commands obedience. It also shapes perception. People don't just follow because of what you did. They follow because you acted like someone who should be followed. The act itself becomes the justification. Take a corporate example. A CEO announces a major restructuring without prior warning. There is confusion, yes, but also clarity. The employees adjust not because they fully understand the change, but because it's already happened. It's real. It forces movement. Later, when the dust settles, the CEO can explain the rationale, framing the decision in terms of vision, necessity, or survival. By then, resistance is weaker. People are already adapting. This tactic also plays out in military strategy, where surprise and speed overwhelm opponents who rely on protocol. But it works just as well in social situations. If you end a toxic relationship abruptly, switch careers without public debate, or make a controversial decision without first asking permission, you remove others' power to influence you in the moment. Their objections come too late, and once a thing is done, people are more likely to rationalize it than reverse it. But for this to work, the action must be firm. If you act quickly and then immediately backpedal or apologize, you destroy the illusion of control. Machiavelli would argue that a fast move must be followed by unwavering confidence, even if it was unpopular. Especially if it was unpopular. People are drawn to strength, not perfection. The beauty of explaining later is that you can frame the narrative after people have already adjusted to the outcome. In that moment, they are more receptive, more willing to listen, and more likely to forgive. You can spin, reframe, or even rebrand the action once its consequences have taken root. But if you explain before you act, you open yourself up to arguments, guilt, delays, and sabotage. Of course, timing is everything. You don't act recklessly, you act calculatedly fast. You study the window of opportunity. You anticipate potential backlash. And then you strike, knowing that control belongs to the one who creates momentum, not the one who waits for permission. To act fast and explain later is to claim territory before anyone else realizes it's up for grabs. It's a Machiavellian truth. Boldness terrifies hesitation, and in that moment of shock, the world shifts in your favor. Use generosity to gain loyalty, then withdraw it. This strategy is a calculated form of influence that turns kindness into currency. Machiavelli understood that people are drawn to those who give freely, especially in moments of need. Generosity creates emotional bonds, a sense of gratitude, and often a sense of obligation. But the Machiavellian twist is this. The generosity is never about giving. It's about setting a hook. You don't give because you're kind. You give to gain control. And once that control is established, you take a step back. Because people cling harder to what they've already received than to what they were never offered. At first, you offer support, attention, rewards, or opportunity. You become the source of abundance. You create dependence, not just practically, but emotionally. They begin to see you as the reason for their progress, their comfort, or their recognition. And once they connect your presence to their sense of security, they want to keep you close. They become loyal, not out of principle, but out of fear of losing what they now feel entitled to. Then comes the withdrawal. Not total, just enough to cause tension, enough to make them feel the gap. When your generosity fades, the person doesn't get angry. They get anxious. They try harder. They become more submissive. They aim to earn your favor back. In this moment, loyalty deepens, not because they appreciate you, but because they're afraid of returning to life without your approval, your resources, or your attention. Machiavelli warned against being generous all the time. Constant generosity drains your resources and makes people ungrateful. Over time, they expect it. What once earned admiration becomes routine. Worse, they begin to resent you for not giving more. This is why the withdrawal is essential. It reignites desire. It makes your presence valuable again. In leadership, this tactic is used often. A manager gives praise and rewards to a rising employee, making them feel valued. But once that loyalty is locked in, the rewards slow down. The employee works harder, hoping to recapture the earlier approval. In politics, a leader might provide economic aid or public benefits to a group, earning loyalty. Later, when that aid is threatened or reduced, the same group becomes more vocal in their support, fearful of losing what they've come to rely on. This isn't cruelty, it's leverage. And like all powerful tactics, it must be used precisely. If you withdraw too soon, you lose trust. If you withdraw too late, your generosity becomes cheap. But when timed correctly, the absence of a gift becomes more powerful than the gift itself. Another layer of this strategy is memory. People remember the first person who helped them during a struggle. That emotional imprint never fully fades. Even if your generosity was calculated, they will recall it as authentic. You become part of their story, and stories drive loyalty deeper than logic ever could. So use generosity not as a rule, but as bait. Make them want more. Make them fear less. And when the time is right, step back, just enough for them to step closer. Not because they have to, because now they need to. Distract with drama while you work in silence. This strategy is the essence of misdirection, using noise to cover movement, spectacle to conceal intent. Machiavelli understood that people are drawn to conflict, emotion, and chaos. They fixate on what's loud, controversial, and disruptive. And while they're watching the drama unfold, you move unseen. You build, plan, and maneuver in silence. When the spotlight is pointed elsewhere, no one sees your hand tightening on the lever of power. Drama is magnetic. People can't resist it. A scandal, an argument, a bold gesture. These capture attention and create narratives. But the Machiavellian mind uses drama as bait. It draws the eyes of opponents, the curiosity of rivals, and the judgment of the crowd. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, the real work is happening, calculated, quiet, and without interruption. This is a tactic used everywhere. In politics, a leader may create a media storm, an inflammatory statement, a sudden firing, a distracting controversy, while passing legislation, shifting alliances, or consolidating influence out of sight. The chaos becomes camouflage. Opponents spend their energy reacting to the noise, never realizing the real danger is what they aren't watching. In business, a CEO might allow public attention to focus on a crisis, poor sales, internal disputes, or a scandal, while quietly restructuring departments, acquiring assets, or preparing a major pivot. When the dust settles, the company is already positioned for advantage. The noise was never a threat. It was cover. On a personal level, the same principle applies. Stirring up small dramas or debates in a social circle can obscure your true intentions. While others are busy gossiping or taking sides, you're securing relationships, gathering information, or preparing a decisive move. The key is to make the drama seem organic, something others believe is unfolding naturally, rather than something you've carefully placed in their path. The power of this strategy lies in its dual effect. First, it misleads others, but second, and perhaps more importantly, it protects your peace. When the world is distracted, you get to think clearly. You get to operate without scrutiny. Silence becomes your ally. And when you finally reveal the outcome of your quiet work, it feels sudden, impressive, even inevitable. But timing is critical. If the drama is too small, it won't distract. If it's too large, it risks spiraling out of control. The drama must be just enough to stir emotion and attention, but never so much that it disrupts your core strategy. You must remain untouched by the fire you ignite. Let others burn, while you remain calm and calculated. This is how power is built unnoticed. While others waste time defending reputations, battling rumors, or reacting to the latest public outrage, you're creating leverage. You're aligning pieces on the board. And when they finally look away from the drama, they'll see that the game has already changed. In Machiavellian thought, distraction is not a delay. It's a weapon. It's how you move without resistance. Talk loud enough to keep them entertained. And while they lean in to listen, you take everything. Quietly, strategically, permanently. Expose weakness in others, never in yourself. This is not just a tactic, it's a principle of survival in the game of power. Machiavelli understood that perception governs influence. And once people perceive you as weak, your control begins to slip. The world is not kind to the vulnerable. Especially in politics, leadership, or competitive environments, weakness, real or perceived, becomes an invitation for challenge, betrayal, or replacement. That's why you must do everything to conceal your own vulnerabilities while subtly shining a spotlight on the flaws of others. When you expose someone's weakness, be it indecision, vanity, insecurity, or incompetence, you lower their status in the eyes of others. You plant seeds of doubt. People begin to second-guess that person's authority, reliability, and capability. It doesn't take open attack. In fact, subtle exposure is more powerful. Ask questions that lead them to reveal confusion. Share a seemingly innocent story that paints them as unreliable. Let their own actions betray them, all while you remain calm, capable, and composed. Meanwhile, your own weaknesses must be guarded fiercely. You cannot afford to let emotions slip, to show hesitation, or to allow others access to your insecurities. The moment you confess too much, you give ammunition to the wrong listener. The moment you stumble publicly, your critics will magnify it. Machiavelli would advise that even when you are shaken internally, you must project resolve externally. Strength must be your mask, even if behind it you're carefully calculating your next step. Consider how this plays out in leadership. A confident tone, steady posture, and consistent decisions create the appearance of competence, even if you're unsure behind closed doors. At the same time, if a rival manager is caught contradicting themselves, doubting their team, or overreacting emotionally, you don't have to call it out directly. You just have to notice it publicly or mention it quietly in the right conversation. Over time, perception does the rest. This also applies in negotiation. You never admit desperation. You never reveal your need. But you do pay attention to the other side's anxieties, constraints, or inconsistencies. That's where leverage lives. The more you know about what limits others, the more you can shape the outcome in your favor, without ever revealing what limits you. A key part of this strategy is discipline. Emotional control is essential. In moments of conflict, keep your reactions measured. In times of loss, project strategy, not panic. Machiavelli saw power as a theater. What matters is not what you feel, but what you display. If others perceive you as calm under pressure and unshaken by adversity, you become a figure of strength, and people rally behind strength. But when you do reveal flaws in others, do it with precision. Avoid cruelty. Be subtle. A harsh attack may backfire and make you look insecure. A surgical exposure, however, one that lets others draw their own conclusions, is far more effective. Let your rival's weakness become common knowledge without your fingerprints on it. Because in the end, power is not about being perfect. It's about being seen as unbreakable while others crack. And when the cracks show, you make sure they're never on your face. They're always on someone else's. Disguise cruelty as necessary justice. This Machiavellian principle is not about being evil for evil's sake. It's about mastering the art of justification. Cruelty, when seen as arbitrary or selfish, sparks rebellion. But when cloaked in the language of order, justice, or protection, it becomes not only tolerable, but often welcomed. People will accept, even applaud, harsh measures as long as they believe those actions serve a greater good. The key is not to avoid cruelty, but to frame it properly. Machiavelli warned that in leadership, weakness is often more dangerous than brutality. A ruler who hesitates to act decisively or who lets sentimentality cloud judgment risks being overthrown. But a ruler who acts with firm authority, especially when punishing disloyalty, disorder, or corruption, creates stability. Still, Machiavelli was clear. The cruelty must never appear personal. It must always be presented as a matter of principle, a necessity, not a desire. Let's take a political example. A newly elected leader comes into office during a time of chaos. To restore order, they impose sweeping reforms, fire long-standing officials, and imprison those accused of undermining the system. To some, this might look ruthless. But if the leader frames these decisions as cleansing the government or protecting the people's trust, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, the same harshness is seen as courage, firmness, moral leadership. This tactic works because people judge actions through context. When cruelty is wrapped in righteousness, it gains legitimacy. Consider the language used in authoritarian regimes or aggressive corporate policies. Phrases like zero tolerance, for the good of the company, or non-negotiable accountability, all serve to rebrand punitive decisions as just ones. The result? Fear is instilled, but dissent is silenced by the illusion of fairness. But this strategy isn't limited to large-scale leadership. In personal relationships or business dynamics, the same concept applies. If you need to cut someone off, remove a toxic employee, or end a partnership, the act itself may be painful. But if you present it as a matter of principle, this behavior can't continue, or I have a responsibility to protect the team, you minimize backlash. You control the moral frame. Timing is also essential. Machiavelli advised that if cruelty must be done, it should be done all at once and early. Prolonged cruelty breeds resentment. Swift and decisive action, however, creates a clean break. Once order is restored, you can return to displays of mercy, generosity, and calm leadership. This contrast deepens your power. People remember the punishment, but also the peace that followed. It's also important to understand that this tactic isn't about deception alone. It's about perception. The leader who believes they are doing what's necessary becomes more convincing. The tone matters. The delivery matters. You must appear reluctant, measured, and above all driven by duty, not ego. The more responsibility you take for the cruelty, the less it looks like cruelty at all. So when harsh action is required, don't flinch, but never allow it to look like revenge or impulsiveness. Make it look like justice. Make it look like principle. And people won't just accept it, they'll respect you more for doing what they couldn't. Mirror their desires to win their trust. This Machiavellian strategy taps into one of the most powerful psychological forces in human behavior, the desire to see oneself reflected in others. People trust those who seem like them. They feel drawn to individuals who share their values, dreams, fears, and priorities. And when someone appears to mirror those inner drivers, trust builds rapidly because it feels like authenticity. But a true strategist doesn't merely relate. They reflect, not to connect, but to control. Machiavelli understood that to gain influence, you must first gain proximity. And the fastest way to get close to someone is to reflect back the version of themselves they most admire. If they see you as aligned with their values, they stop questioning your motives. If they see you as someone who wants what they want, they invite you in, sharing information, access, and sometimes even power. But this reflection must be precise. It's not about being fake. It's about being strategic with your similarity. You begin by identifying what they desire. Is it status, security, recognition, freedom, influence? Then you subtly reflect those same priorities in your words, actions, and even body language. If they're passionate about legacy, you speak of long-term vision. If they crave stability, you become a voice of caution and balance. This doesn't just make them comfortable, it makes them feel seen. And being seen is powerful. This is the same principle used by skilled negotiators, con artists, and charismatic leaders. The mirroring is subtle: tone, pace, interests, even phrasing. Over time, this creates a psychological feedback loop. They begin to believe that you get them in a way others don't. And once they believe that, their defenses lower. They begin to trust your intentions. They become easier to influence because they assume your goals align. Politicians do this constantly. When speaking to workers, they highlight humble beginnings and hard work. When addressing elites, they talk about vision, innovation, and economic stewardship. The message shifts depending on the audience, but always mirrors the values of the crowd. The content may change, but the technique stays the same. Reflect the audience's identity back to them, and they will trust you to represent them. This tactic also works well in personal dynamics. If you're trying to influence a superior, a client, or even a partner, begin by understanding what they most desire from the world or fear losing. Then embody that desire. Don't argue. Don't correct. Align. Agreement breeds comfort, and comfort breeds trust. But here's the twist. While they believe you are like them, you are studying them. Their language gives away their values. Their stories reveal their insecurities. Their priorities expose their vulnerabilities. And the more they trust you, the more they disclose. You're not just mirroring to bond. You're mirroring to gain insight and leverage. In the Machiavellian view, trust isn't freely given. It's designed, shaped, and earned through careful reflection of someone's inner world. And when done well, it becomes the bridge between access and influence. They think you're an ally, but you've simply learned how to become their favorite version of themselves. Use flattery as a tool, not a habit. Machiavelli understood that flattery, when used with precision, can open doors that force never could. But he also warned against the overuse of praise, because when flattery becomes predictable, it loses its power. The true strategist knows that compliments are not about making people feel good. They're about making people pliable. The goal is not to stroke egos endlessly, but to activate egos strategically. Flattery works because it satisfies one of the deepest human needs, the need to feel important, admired, and seen. People are drawn to those who mirror their self-image or enhance it. When someone flatters us, we lower our guard. We interpret it as recognition, not manipulation. That's why a well-timed compliment can secure influence, gain access, and build alliances when used sparingly. The key is subtlety and scarcity. Flattery must feel earned. It must be specific and occasional. A constant stream of praise begins to feel hollow. Worse, it can trigger suspicion. People begin to wonder what you really want or assume you're being insincere. But if you flatter only when the timing is perfect, after a big win, during a public moment of vulnerability, or right before asking a favor, it feels genuine and powerful. You become someone who recognizes greatness selectively, making your praise more valuable. Machiavelli would argue that flattery is most effective when it's embedded in strategy. For example, when approaching a powerful figure, don't just compliment them on their achievements. Frame them as a visionary, someone who sees the future others miss. Suggest that you, too, see that vision and are uniquely suited to help them realize it. This turns flattery into alignment, and alignment into alliance. This tactic also allows you to influence behavior. Compliment a trait you want to encourage. If you want someone to be more decisive, praise their past boldness. If you need someone to listen more carefully, tell them they have a gift for understanding nuance. People will often rise to meet the image you give them, especially if they believe it was sincerely observed. But never let flattery become your default mode. The moment people expect praise from you, they stop valuing it. Worse, you become someone they see as manipulative. And the Machiavellian goal is not just to gain influence, it's to maintain it. That requires discipline. Let your praise be rare and well-targeted. Make people remember it. Let them crave it again. Another advanced use of flattery is through contrast. If you typically present yourself as critical or demanding, a rare compliment feels enormous. It carries weight. People begin to seek your approval, not because you're kind, but because your approval is scarce. This gives you subtle authority over their self-perception. Lastly, remember this. Excessive flattery benefits the recipient in the short term, but the flatterer in the long term, if done wisely. It creates a dependency on your approval, a desire to impress you, a willingness to align with your values. But only if it's used with the restraint of a master. Praise is not a gift, it's a lever. Use it wisely or not at all. Silence opponents publicly, reward loyalty privately. This principle reflects a deep understanding of how power, fear, and loyalty interact in any hierarchy. Machiavelli recognized that leadership is not just about making decisions, it's about setting examples. When someone challenges your authority, questions your position, or disrupts your control, they must be silenced, not quietly, but visibly. Because in the court of power, it's not just about what you tolerate, it's about what others see you tolerate. Public silence of an opponent sends a message. It tells everyone watching that rebellion has consequences. It reinforces boundaries and cements your dominance. Whether the silence comes in the form of dismissal, public rebuttal, or strategic removal. The key is visibility. Private reprimands do nothing. Public actions set tone. If you allow someone to defy you without consequence, you encourage more defiance. But if you handle the situation decisively and others witness it, you instill discipline without needing to punish everyone. Machiavelli didn't advocate cruelty for show. He advocated for calculated actions that reinforce stability. When you eliminate opposition publicly, it doesn't just deal with the threat at hand. It prevents future threats. People begin to think twice. They don't just fear you, they respect the system you've put in place. And they recognize that stepping out of line comes with real, tangible risk. But the second half of this strategy is just as important. Reward loyalty privately. Not with fanfare, not with excessive praise, but with influence, access, and opportunity. Why? Because public rewards breed jealousy. If others see you favoring someone too openly, it can fracture your alliances. Even loyal supporters may begin to envy the attention. Quiet rewards, on the other hand, deepen loyalty without disrupting the hierarchy. Let's say you lead a team or an organization. Someone stands by you during a tense situation. You don't need to announce their value in a speech. You take them aside, give them a new role, more responsibility, or inside access to future plans. That private elevation tells them, "I see you." And more importantly, it keeps the reward feeling personal, not performative. Private rewards also create quiet dependency. The individual knows they are benefiting from your favor, but they also know it's discreet. That secrecy builds trust, and more importantly, binds them to you. They're less likely to betray a relationship that feels exclusive and intimate. Public rewards might build momentary morale. Private rewards build long-term allegiance. The balance between public silence and private reward creates an ecosystem of order. People know what happens when they cross the line. They also know that loyalty is noticed, even if it's not shouted from rooftops. This dual structure of consequence and incentive is at the core of Machiavellian leadership. You don't need to rule through fear or love alone. You rule by managing optics and emotions simultaneously. When others see that opposition is dangerous and loyalty is valuable, even if no one else sees how it's rewarded, you create a controlled environment where behavior is shaped without constant intervention. Silence, disobedience where everyone can see. Reward obedience where no one expects it. That's not just control, it's mastery. Create crises you can solve. This strategy is one of the most cunning tools in the Machiavellian playbook. It's not about avoiding chaos, it's about orchestrating it. Because when you are the one who presents the problem and then offers the solution, you become indispensable. You gain power not by preventing disruption, but by positioning yourself as the only one who can end it. Machiavelli understood that people are most loyal not to leaders who offer stability, but to those who rescue them from fear. Crises trigger primal instincts. They make people anxious, confused, and desperate for direction. In that moment, whoever provides clarity, safety, or even the illusion of resolution becomes the hero, and that hero holds tremendous power. But here's the Machiavellian twist. Not all crises need to be real. In fact, the most effective ones are manufactured or amplified. They must be believable, emotionally charged, and urgent, but carefully controlled behind the scenes. You want panic, not collapse. You want disruption, not destruction. And most importantly, you want to already have the solution in your back pocket before the crisis even peaks. This tactic is used constantly in politics. A leader stirs division, fans cultural tension, or emphasizes a looming external threat, then steps forward with a policy, a plan, or a decisive act of leadership. The public, too overwhelmed by emotion to dissect the truth, embraces the savior. The crisis may have been exaggerated or even engineered, but the resolution cements loyalty. In business, executives may allow problems to escalate under a previous manager or competitor, only to sweep in later with new leadership, revised strategies, or sweeping change. Employees and investors rally behind the turnaround story, often unaware that the savior had influence over the mess from the beginning. The chaos becomes part of the performance. The cleanup becomes the myth. In relationships or social dynamics, manipulators may provoke conflict or create misunderstandings, then present themselves as the voice of reason, the one who can make things right. This subtle emotional manipulation creates dependency. The person feels grateful, even indebted, to the very individual who destabilized them in the first place. But for this strategy to work, the crisis must never feel artificial. It must touch on real fears or frustrations. It must have just enough truth to feel authentic. And your solution must appear not only competent, but essential. The best crises are those that reflect a weakness already present, something others are too afraid to face. You bring it to the surface, then offer to make it disappear. Timing is critical. You must create just enough pressure that people seek relief, but not so much that they revolt. And you must remain calm throughout, because while others are panicking, your poise will reinforce the belief that you are uniquely suited to lead. This is not cruelty. It's design. You are not waiting for opportunities. You're building them. And in doing so, you elevate yourself without needing to climb, because when people are in crisis, they don't look for alternatives. They look for saviors, and you've already rehearsed your role. Maintain power through fear, not friendship. This strategy speaks to one of Machiavelli's most controversial but enduring beliefs, that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. While friendship is pleasant and can build support in peaceful times, it is fragile. It shifts with emotion, mood, and changing alliances. Fear, on the other hand, is reliable, predictable. It keeps people in check even when they dislike you, because fear does not require affection, only respect and caution. Machiavelli understood that people are fundamentally self-interested. When times are good, they may offer loyalty out of friendship or admiration. But when your power is tested, when you falter, become unpopular, or are threatened, those same people may abandon you if their loyalty was built only on emotional attachment. Friendship is conditional. Fear is structural. To maintain power through fear doesn't mean ruling through cruelty or tyranny. It means establishing boundaries so clearly, so firmly, that no one dares to cross them. It means punishing betrayal decisively. It means allowing no confusion about what disobedience or disrespect will cost. The goal is not to inspire terror, but to build a presence so strong that people instinctively hesitate before challenging you. The moment you rely too heavily on friendship, you open the door to emotional manipulation. People will expect special treatment. They will ask for favors, make excuses, and grow resentful when you enforce rules. When you lead through fear, expectations are clearer. You create a culture where respect is earned, not assumed, and loyalty is maintained through discipline, not constant emotional maintenance. In politics, the most enduring leaders are not necessarily the most beloved. They are the ones who command fear. Their enemies tread lightly. Their allies stay loyal not out of love, but out of an understanding that turning against them carries consequences. In business, executives who are respected but not overly friendly are more likely to be obeyed, especially in high-stakes situations. Their decisions hold weight because they've created a climate where rules matter more than relationships. Fear also deters opportunism. When people like you too much, they sometimes mistake your warmth for weakness. They overstep. They test boundaries. But when fear is present, even a smile carries authority. You don't need to raise your voice or issue constant reminders. Your reputation does the work for you. That's the essence of power. Silent control. Yet it is vital to balance fear with fairness. If fear turns to hatred, your position becomes unstable. Machiavelli warned that cruelty must be swift, justified, and followed by stability. People will accept even harsh rulers if they bring order, but they will turn on those who abuse fear recklessly. Your power must always appear firm, but not needlessly cruel. If you punish, do so publicly and with reason. If you show mercy, make sure it's seen as strength, not softness. In the end, power rooted in friendship may win hearts, but power rooted in fear controls actions. And in the Machiavellian world, action, not affection, is the currency of survival. Let others be liked. You be respected. And where necessary, be feared. Because those who fear you may not love you, but they will never forget the cost of crossing you. Know when to break the rules, and do it cleanly. This Machiavellian philosophy separates the opportunist from the true strategist. Rules in any system, whether legal, moral, or social, are created to maintain order. But those same rules can become obstacles to power, progress, or dominance. Machiavelli never argued against rules entirely. Instead, he urged leaders to understand when rules serve them, and when they must be broken with precision, purpose, and absolute confidence. Breaking the rules isn't about chaos or rebellion. It's about recognizing that sometimes the path to victory lies just outside the lines. But the break must be surgical, not sloppy. You do not stumble across a line. You cross it with clarity, already knowing how you'll justify the act afterward. That is the Machiavellian difference, breaking a rule and still appearing justified. Most people fear breaking rules because they worry about consequences, judgment, or guilt. The Machiavellian thinker sees rules as tools, not commandments. When a rule protects your position, you enforce it. When it blocks your rise, you remove it, quietly, efficiently, and with as little mess as possible. You make the move, and then you reshape the narrative so that the break appears necessary, even noble. Take politics as an example. A politician might bypass protocol, push through an unpopular decision, or override an advisory committee. But if the outcome is stability, economic gain, or public support, the means are quickly forgotten. The act of defiance becomes retroactively justified by results. That's the essence of breaking rules cleanly. Don't linger in the act. Move fast, deliver results, and frame the decision as foresight others lacked. This principle also applies to personal power. If a social norm prevents you from seizing an opportunity, whether in relationships, business, or influence, you bend or bypass that norm. But never leave traces. Don't brag. Don't over-explain. Don't seek validation. The clean rule breaker doesn't ask for permission or forgiveness. They move, execute, and allow others to catch up. A clean break also means avoiding unnecessary damage. You don't create enemies unless you must. You don't humiliate others when you can outmaneuver them quietly. Noise invites scrutiny. Silence preserves power. The goal isn't to prove you're above the rules. The goal is to make it look like the rules bent naturally around you. Timing is everything. A rule broken too early looks reckless. Too late, and the opportunity is gone. The Machiavellian mind waits for the moment when the break is most effective, when the opposition is weakest, the allies are most loyal, or the need for change is loudest. Then, with careful execution, the act is done in one strike, fast, decisive, and impossible to reverse. And if backlash comes, be prepared. Control the narrative. Frame yourself as the visionary, the reformer, the one who did what others were afraid to. Never look hesitant. Never look ashamed. The public forgives boldness more than it forgives indecision. They may question your method, but if you win, they'll rewrite the story to make you look right. So break the rules, but never with hesitation, and never without a plan. Do it cleanly, do it quietly, and walk away stronger than before. Never let people know what you're really thinking. This is one of the most essential Machiavellian strategies, simple in theory, but incredibly powerful in practice. It is not about deception for its own sake, but about control. When others don't know your true thoughts, they cannot predict your moves, prepare for your plans, or preempt your ambitions. Your mind becomes your strongest fortress. The less they understand it, the more they fear it. Machiavelli observed that a ruler, or anyone seeking power, must always keep their intentions hidden. If people can't read you, they can't manipulate you. The moment you speak openly about your strategies, your desires, or your plans, you hand over leverage. You become transparent, predictable, vulnerable. In contrast, the one who keeps their true motives hidden becomes an enigma, and enigmas command attention. People begin projecting their assumptions onto you. Some overestimate you, others underestimate you, but both lose accuracy, which gives you an advantage. When your intentions are masked, you're playing a game they can't see the rules to. That makes you dangerous, and danger, Machiavelli knew, often ensures survival. One effective method to achieve this is misdirection. Let people believe they've figured you out. Offer a few superficial opinions. React in expected ways. Agree publicly while you prepare privately. By giving people a predictable exterior, you lull them into comfort. They assume they understand you, and that's when they stop watching closely. Behind that false front, your real moves remain unseen. This principle is especially important in negotiations or competitive environments. If your opponent knows what you want most, they can use it against you. If they know your limits, they can test them. But if you remain unreadable, they are forced to guess. Guessing creates mistakes. Mistakes create openings. Openings become power. Even in relationships, this strategy applies. If someone always knows how you feel, what you fear, or what you're planning, they can shape your choices. But if you withhold your inner world, sharing just enough to stay relatable, but never enough to be predictable, you protect yourself from manipulation. You become the one who steers the emotional current instead of being swept by it. It's important to distinguish secrecy from silence. You don't need to be cold or uncommunicative. You can be warm, engaging, and even open about harmless things. The key is to never reveal the thoughts that matter, your ambitions, your next move, your doubts. These are to be guarded carefully, shared only when they've already become action. Machiavelli would also advise using the uncertainty you create as a weapon. If people aren't sure where you stand, they hesitate to challenge you. If they think you might retaliate, expose them, or simply outsmart them, they proceed with caution. This hesitation is valuable. It buys you time, deters enemies, and increases your mystique. Because in the end, it's not what you say that builds power. It's what you withhold. Let others fill the silence with their own assumptions. Let them guess, wonder, speculate. And while they're trying to figure you out, you're already 5 steps ahead. That is the advantage of being unreadable, and the reason your thoughts should remain your own. Control information, and you control the game. In any power dynamic, whether political, social, or professional, information is not just a resource. It's the currency of control. Machiavelli knew that those who control the flow of information shape reality itself. If you can determine what people know, when they know it, and how they interpret it, you can guide their decisions without force. You don't need to coerce when you can frame. You don't need to fight when you can filter. Information creates perception, and perception determines behavior. When people are fed a steady stream of carefully curated data, favorable statistics, strategic stories, rumors, or silence, they act in accordance with what they believe to be true. The source of that belief? Whoever handed them the information first. That's why the Machiavellian mind doesn't just speak truth, it designs it. To control information effectively, you must first understand how people consume it. Most individuals don't think critically about what they hear. They repeat, react, and reinforce. Once a narrative is in motion, it becomes self-sustaining. That's the power of the first whisper. If you control the first version of the story, even when the truth emerges later, it arrives too late. Your framing has already taken root. Leaders who master this art don't need to shout. They leak. They suggest. They allow just enough clarity to stir support or create fear, never enough to be fully understood. For example, in politics, governments often release official narratives while suppressing inconvenient facts. In business, executives control internal communication to manage morale, prevent panic, or drive a merger without protest. Information becomes less about accuracy and more about effect. This principle also applies on a personal level. Those who gossip strategically can isolate enemies, elevate allies, or build loyalty by offering access to inside knowledge. When you're the source of valuable information, people come to you. They trust you, they rely on you, and that dependency creates power. Just be cautious. If you overshare or lie without precision, you lose credibility. Your information must always carry just enough truth to be useful, whether it's accurate or not. Another advantage of controlling information is concealment. By limiting what others know about your plans, your weaknesses, or your alliances, you protect yourself. The less people understand about your strategy, the harder it is to oppose it. While others react to yesterday's facts, you're already working on tomorrow's move. Machiavelli emphasized that those in power should never allow the public or their rivals to see the full picture. Transparency is not a virtue in the game of strategy. It's a liability. Control the narrative. Release what benefits you. Withhold what empowers them. And always remember, information isn't free. It's a weapon. In the modern world where information travels fast and attention is short, the ability to curate truth is more valuable than the truth itself. If you can become the gatekeeper of knowledge, you don't just influence behavior, you dictate it, and in doing so, you turn information into domination. Quiet. Invisible. Unquestioned. Hide your intentions with layers of charm. Machiavelli understood that the most effective power moves are the ones no one sees coming. If people know what you truly want, they can block you, resist you, or manipulate you in return. But if your true goals are veiled beneath likability, wit, and warmth, you disarm suspicion. You don't just protect your strategy, you become someone others welcome, trust, and even defend. And that makes your rise unstoppable. Charm is a cloak. It makes people feel at ease. It makes you appear open while revealing nothing. It allows you to observe without being observed. People are more likely to underestimate someone who makes them laugh, who compliments them, or who seems emotionally generous. Charm builds rapport, and rapport lowers defenses. When you're charming, people give you access to their thoughts, their habits, their weaknesses, and they rarely realize they're doing it. The mistake many power seekers make is rushing their agenda. They push too soon, speak too directly, or act too obviously. This triggers alarm bells. It invites scrutiny. But if your ambition is hidden beneath friendly gestures, innocent questions, or shared experiences, your progress becomes invisible. You're not seen as a threat. You're seen as an ally. And that's exactly where you want to be. This tactic works especially well in competitive environments, offices, social hierarchies, even politics. Instead of positioning yourself as a rival, you become the confidant. You compliment without flattery. You agree without submission. You let others speak more than you do. They begin to feel safe around you. And while they're opening up, you're taking notes. You're learning how they think, what they want, what they fear, all while your true intentions stay buried beneath the surface. Charm also allows you to influence behavior without confrontation. You don't need to demand or correct. A raised eyebrow, a well-placed joke, or a story with a veiled lesson can do more to shift. someone's direction than direct orders ever could. The charm masks the manipulation. It makes people feel like they made the choice themselves, when really, you guided them there. Machiavellian charm is not about being fake. It's about being intentional. Every compliment, every laugh, every moment of empathy serves a function: to conceal your motives, to gather information, to build emotional equity that you'll cash in later. The charm is genuine enough to be convincing, but never uncontrolled. It's calculated softness, a performance of likability with a sharp purpose behind it. Even when you make moves that benefit you, do it with charm. Frame your wins as mutual. Make others feel included. Share credit generously so you can quietly take more control. Let others celebrate your charm while never realizing they're slowly stepping into your design. Because once your intentions are visible, others can prepare for you. But when they only see the smile, the story, the shared drink, they don't see the strategy. They don't see the ambition. They don't see the end game. And that's the secret. Charm is not about being harmless. It's about being invisible until it's too late to stop you. Punish swiftly, forgive slowly. Machiavelli believed that the handling of punishment and forgiveness is not just a matter of morality, it's a matter of strategy. People are constantly watching how you respond to disloyalty, mistakes, and offenses. If you hesitate in your punishment, you signal weakness. If you forgive too easily, you signal softness. But when you punish swiftly, you create fear and establish clear boundaries. And when you forgive slowly, only after deep consideration, you make your mercy valuable and your authority unquestionable. Swift punishment sends a message. It shows decisiveness. It reinforces order. If someone crosses a line, betrays you, undermines your authority, or breaks a rule, you must act quickly. The longer you delay, the more the offense festers, both in your mind and in the minds of others. People begin to wonder if you're unsure, if you're conflicted, or if you lack the courage to act. That doubt erodes your power. But swift punishment is not the same as reckless reaction. It must be measured, deliberate, and public. When a response is both fast and controlled, it gives others a clear reference point. It tells them, this is what happens when the line is crossed. You establish cause and effect, action and consequence. You don't just restore order, you teach others not to disrupt it in the first place. On the other hand, forgiveness must be rare, earned, and slow. When you forgive too quickly, people start to take your boundaries less seriously. They believe they can test you again. But if forgiveness is something that requires time, reflection, and often demonstration of loyalty or penance, it becomes powerful. You turn mercy into leverage. People begin to crave your forgiveness, to work for it. They grow more loyal in the process. This slow approach to forgiveness also protects your reputation. It shows that you are not swayed by emotion or guilt, that you do not forgive simply to avoid discomfort. Instead, you forgive only when it serves a greater purpose, whether it's to preserve an alliance, restore balance, or strategically rebuild trust. That kind of mercy is respected, not exploited. Machiavelli also recognized the emotional impact of this principle. Punishment that is swift creates clarity. There's no lingering tension. The pain is immediate, and then it's over. But the slowness of forgiveness creates anticipation, reflection, and sometimes transformation. The offender has to live with the uncertainty, and others see that forgiveness is not a given, it's a reward. This dynamic also allows you to control the narrative. When you punish, you do it fast so that no one doubts your strength. When you forgive, you do it slowly, ensuring that the spotlight remains on your generosity, not the offender's mistake. You control the pacing of justice and the rhythm of reconciliation. In leadership, relationships, and negotiation, This principle draws a clear line between power and people-pleasing. Be feared for your swift hand and admired for your rare grace. Never reverse that. Because once people realize that punishment is rare and forgiveness is easy, they stop fearing your authority. But if you make your mercy feel expensive and your punishment immediate, you gain both obedience and respect. Kill rumors by planting better ones. Machiavelli understood something that remains true centuries later. In the court of public opinion, truth doesn't always win. What matters more is which story spreads faster, feels more compelling, and satisfies the emotional needs of the crowd. When a damaging rumor begins to circulate, confronting it directly often backfires. Denial can look like guilt. Silence can be twisted into confirmation. But a more elegant solution is to replace the rumor, not with facts, but with a better rumor, one that distracts, redirects, or reshapes the narrative in your favor. Rumors thrive on ambiguity. They fill in the blanks when information is scarce. They grow in the dark. That's why trying to correct them rarely works. People aren't drawn to truth, they're drawn to stories, and if the story you give them is more entertaining, more flattering, or more emotionally satisfying than the original, it will spread faster and overwrite the original. This tactic relies on a deep understanding of human psychology. People want to believe what fits their view of the world, especially if it confirms their fears or validates their hopes. If a rumor paints you as weak, corrupt, or untrustworthy, trying to disprove it logically is often useless. Instead, plant a new story, one that reframes your actions as strategic, misunderstood, or even heroic. For example, if people begin whispering that you're losing control of your position, you don't respond by denying it. You start a new rumor that you're preparing a quiet reshuffle or planning a major move behind the scenes. Suddenly, the narrative flips. You're no longer weakened, you're working in secrecy, playing a deeper game. The original rumor fades, not because it was disproven, but because it was outcompeted. Politicians do this constantly. When accused of weakness or scandal, they shift focus by leaking a dramatic but controlled piece of information, an upcoming policy, a rival's misstep, or a leaked internal memo. The media, always hungry for novelty, latches on to the new narrative, and the original accusation fades into background noise. In business, executives might use rumors to control employee morale or manage public perception. If there are whispers of layoffs instead of outright denial, they may leak a rumor of an upcoming acquisition or a strategic pivot. The attention shifts. The fear is redirected. The story becomes one of opportunity, not collapse. This tactic isn't just about defense. It can also be used offensively. You can destabilize rivals by planting rumors that create doubt, then offer a more favorable story that centers you as the competent alternative. You shape the battlefield not by fighting every lie, but by feeding the hunger for narrative with precision. But this strategy requires discipline. Your rumors must be believable, but not traceable. They should be delivered indirectly, through anonymous tips, secondary sources, or casual conversation. The best rumors feel like they weren't planted at all. They feel discovered, because once people are chasing your story, they're no longer chasing the truth. They're chasing your design. And when you control the rumors, you control what people think is real. And that, in Machiavellian terms, is far more valuable than truth itself. Appear strong even when you're weak. This Machiavellian principle is about psychological warfare, not brute force. Power often lies not in your actual strength, but in how others perceive your strength. If your enemies believe you are powerful, they hesitate. If your allies believe you are in control, they remain loyal. But if they sense vulnerability, uncertainty, doubt, weakness, they may strike, defect, or challenge your authority. That's why appearing strong, especially when you're not, is not just a tactic, it's a necessity. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes behavior. People don't follow the strongest, they follow the one who looks unshakable. And the moment your doubt becomes visible, your influence starts to crumble. Therefore, when you are weak, you must master the art of posture, speak clearly, act decisively, and give the impression that every move is calculated, even if you're scrambling beneath the surface. Let others see confidence, not chaos. This isn't about arrogance or bluster. In fact, loud, aggressive behavior can often signal insecurity. True Machiavellian strength is quiet but firm. It's conveyed through calm speech, unshaken presence, and firm boundaries. You don't need to convince people you're invincible, just that opposing you will be more trouble than it's worth. When facing challenges, downplay them. Present losses as temporary setbacks. Reframe failures as steps in a longer strategy. If you're outnumbered, act as if you're biding your time for a bigger play. When your resources are low, let others believe you're simply conserving for something greater. The illusion of control becomes a shield. This principle is especially powerful during transitions or crises. When leaders falter, organizations, teams, and even families look for certainty. If you can provide the appearance of steadiness, you become the emotional anchor, regardless of what's happening behind the scenes. People want to believe that someone has a plan. When you appear strong, they assume you do. It's also a deterrent. Rivals and enemies often test boundaries when they sense weakness. But if your responses are sharp, consistent, and unflinching, they begin to second guess. The fear of what you might do becomes more powerful than what you can do. That uncertainty becomes your silent weapon. There's also value in mystery. If people can't read your inner state, they project strength onto you. They assume you know more than you do, that you have more support than you do, that your silence is strategy, not fear. This keeps you from becoming a target. The best power is the kind that doesn't have to shout. It simply exists, unshaken. But appearing strong doesn't mean denying reality. Behind the scenes, you must still work to stabilize, recover, or rebuild. This isn't about pretending forever. It's about buying time. Time to gather allies, time to pivot, time to plan. The illusion protects you until reality catches up. Because in the Machiavellian world, weakness is a scent. And if you allow it to escape, predators will come. But if you mask it with confidence, control, and calm, even when your foundation is shaking, then no one dares to test how strong you really are. Exploit the morality of others without living by it. This Machiavellian strategy draws a sharp line between perception and practice, between what others believe and what you use them to believe. Morality is powerful because people build their lives around it. They fight for it, sacrifice for it, and structure their actions to stay within its boundaries. But if you're bound by the same rules, you are predictable, and predictability in the game of power is weakness. Machiavelli understood that it is far more effective to let others believe in moral absolutes while you navigate outside of them, using their convictions as levers. Most people want to be seen as good. They strive to do what's right, follow rules, and be consistent with their values. This makes them easy to anticipate and easy to manipulate. You already know how a good person will react when presented with a moral dilemma. They'll hesitate. They'll default to empathy. They'll give second chances. This predictability can be turned into an advantage, especially when you're willing to step outside those lines yourself. For example, if someone is committed to honesty, you can feed them information they will accept at face value. If someone prides themselves on forgiveness, you can betray them subtly, knowing they'll feel morally obligated to give you another chance. If a group upholds justice, you can position yourself as the victim, even if you're not, and let their values do the work of defending you. This doesn't mean being openly immoral. That would invite backlash. It means understanding morality without being constrained by it. You must study the moral code of the people around you, what they believe in, what they fear violating, what lines they refuse to cross. Then you operate one step beyond them, staying just out of reach of their understanding, but well within their emotional framework. Religious, political, and ideological systems are especially ripe for this. Entire institutions are built on moral codes. Leaders who appear to embody those codes earn loyalty, obedience, even worship. But behind the scenes, those same leaders may operate with a ruthless pragmatism. They know that the appearance of moral alignment is more valuable than actual virtue. People want to believe their leaders are righteous. If you give them that illusion, they'll overlook almost anything. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must know how to be not good and use it when necessary. If you live by strict virtue, you give others the power to exploit your consistency. But if you use virtue as a tool, appearing just, generous, or humble when it serves your interests, you gain all the benefits of moral approval without the cost of moral limitation. The goal is not to destroy morality, it's to weaponize it. Use it to build trust. Use it to silence doubt. Use it to blind others to what you're really doing. Because while they're busy trying to live by their values, you're using those values to build your influence. That's not dishonesty. That's strategy. And in the Machiavellian world, strategy always wins. Play the victim if it gains you power. In Machiavellian strategy, power doesn't always come from dominance. Sometimes it comes from perceived weakness. Victimhood, when used deliberately, can be one of the most persuasive and manipulative tools in your arsenal. It evokes sympathy, deflects blame, and silences critics. More importantly, it gives you control over the narrative, because when people see you as the one who was wronged, they stop looking at your intentions and start focusing on your emotions. And emotions, not facts, drive loyalty. Playing the victim isn't about lying flat on the floor, it's about framing. You frame events in a way that casts you as the one who suffered injustice, betrayal, or oppression. You don't need to invent tragedy. You just emphasize the parts of the truth that serve your position. You highlight the unfair treatment, the betrayal, the misunderstanding. You downplay your role, and you let others rush in to defend you. People feel heroic when they rescue victims, and if you offer them that role, they'll attach themselves to your cause with passion and certainty. Machiavelli would argue that when used with intelligence, victimhood becomes a shield and a sword. It protects you from attack because criticizing a perceived victim is socially dangerous. No one wants to be seen as cruel or insensitive. At the same time, it allows you to go on the offensive. You can demand compensation, loyalty, attention, or even revenge, all under the banner of justice. You're not asking for power, you're restoring balance. This tactic is often used in politics. A candidate who loses an election doesn't fade quietly. They declare that the system was rigged, that forces conspired against them. Whether true or not, this claim galvanizes supporters. They no longer follow the candidate just for their policies. They rally to defend them. A politician who was once just a leader becomes a symbol, and symbols are harder to challenge. In social settings, this principle plays out just as effectively. A coworker who frames themselves as the target of office politics can gain allies, earn concessions, or avoid accountability. In relationships, playing the victim can manipulate the emotional balance, turning guilt into leverage. The victim role removes responsibility while increasing influence. You are no longer the actor, you are the acted upon. And that's a powerful place to be when carefully controlled. But the key is subtlety. Overplay it and you look manipulative. Make it too obvious and people begin to resent you. A successful victim narrative must feel reluctant, not rehearsed. You don't beg for sympathy, You allow others to offer it. You create situations where their only logical conclusion is that you were treated unfairly, and then you let their emotions do the work. Once you gain power through victimhood, you can pivot. Shift back into strength. Use your regained position not to remain weak, but to rebuild influence. And if done correctly, those who supported you during your suffering will remain loyal, believing they were part of something noble. They'll never realize they were just pieces in a larger game, one you designed from the shadows, with tears on your face and strategy in your heart. Use religion as a mask, not a mirror. This principle, rooted in Machiavellian realism, is about understanding the utility of belief systems rather than becoming a servant to them. Religion, any widely accepted moral or spiritual framework, is one of the most powerful social forces in human history. It shapes values, behavior, loyalty, and identity. But for the Machiavellian thinker, it is not a path to salvation. It is a tool. A mask worn when needed to inspire trust, deflect suspicion, and unify people under your influence. Not a mirror in which to reflect your true intentions. Machiavelli observed that rulers who appeared religious gained favor among their people, even if they secretly acted with ruthless pragmatism. Why? Because religion confers automatic trust. When someone appears devout, honest, and morally anchored, people assume their motives are pure. This assumption makes it easier to manipulate, govern, or persuade, because people stop questioning why you're doing something. They assume it's the right thing, simply because of the values you claim to follow. This tactic is especially effective because challenging someone who wears the mask of religion is socially and psychologically difficult. If you criticize someone seen as religious, you risk appearing disrespectful, even blasphemous. That social shield is powerful. It silences dissent, disarms critics, and elevates your moral authority, even if your real agenda has nothing to do with faith. History is filled with leaders, movements, and empires that wielded religion as a political tool. Religious symbolism, language, and rituals were not used merely for worship, but to control narratives, justify war, impose laws, and inspire obedience. The appearance of spiritual alignment gave legitimacy to otherwise self-serving acts. It wrapped conquest in righteousness and power in purity. In personal dynamics, the same pattern applies. If you present yourself as someone who lives by strong spiritual or moral principles, people are more likely to trust your intentions. You can use this mask to gain access to communities, to influence decisions, or to forge bonds with those who define their identity through faith. But behind the mask, your real strategy can remain untouched, focused not on faith but on influence. However, there's a delicate balance to maintain. The mask must be convincing. You must understand the values and language of the religion you invoke. You must know when to speak humbly, when to quote scripture, when to display remorse or gratitude in public ways. Overplay it, and you become suspicious. Underplay it, and the mask loses power. Like any disguise, it must be tailored and worn with precision. This tactic also grants flexibility. You can justify harsh actions, punishment, exclusion, even manipulation, by couching them in religious reasoning. "It's not my will, it's God's will" becomes a phrase that removes personal responsibility while adding divine weight to your decisions. You're not the villain, you're the instrument of a higher plan. The Machiavellian thinker doesn't kneel at the altar of belief. They study it. They understand its symbols, its emotions, its hold on the masses, and when necessary, they step into the role of the believer, not to follow, but to lead, not with sincerity, but with strategy. Because in the end, faith is not only a source of comfort, it's a source of power, and those who wear it wisely can move entire nations, all while hiding their true face behind the sacred veil. Give people just enough hope to keep them submissive. This Machiavellian principle is one of the most psychologically potent strategies for long-term control. Total despair breeds rebellion. Total satisfaction breeds independence. But the delicate space in between, hope, creates compliance. When people believe that something better is just around the corner, they endure far more than they would otherwise tolerate. They accept delay, discomfort, even injustice, because they convince themselves that tomorrow will be better than today. Machiavelli understood that a leader doesn't need to make people truly happy, only hopeful. Hope is a leash. When wielded with care, it keeps people focused on an imaginary future rather than the harsh reality of the present. The masses will endure hardship, injustice, or stagnation if they think change is coming. They wait patiently for rewards that are never guaranteed, chasing promises that always remain just out of reach. The power of hope lies in its vagueness. You never need to commit to a concrete deadline or specific result. You simply suggest improvement. You float the idea of progress. You point to a future where everything will be different once the plan is complete, once the enemy is defeated, once the system is fixed. The lack of clarity works in your favor. People fill in the blanks with their own imagination. They create personal visions of success, tailored to their desires, and attribute those imagined futures to you. This tactic is seen in politics constantly. Leaders make grand promises of reform, prosperity, or justice. But the timelines are always vague, the steps ambiguous. Meanwhile, the public is placated. Instead of demanding change now, they wait for it. Instead of organizing resistance, they invest emotionally in the hope that the leader will deliver. And if dissatisfaction grows too strong, a new promise is issued. A fresh slogan, a new phase, a new delay, dressed as progress. In workplaces, this principle keeps employees bound to underwhelming roles. They're told they're on the path to promotion. They're praised for their potential. A raise or title is always just one more project away. The hope keeps them working harder, longer, and with fewer complaints. But when the reward finally arrives, if it does, it's usually less than what they expected. By then, they're too tired or too dependent to walk away. Even in relationships, people use this tactic to maintain control. They offer emotional breadcrumbs. Things will be better soon. I just need time. We're almost there. The hope becomes a reason to stay, to endure, to keep giving. And the person in control never needs to actually change. They just need to suggest that change is coming. But this strategy only works when used with precision. Too much delay, and hope turns to bitterness. Too much reward, and the submissive become empowered. The key is to manage expectations, control the narrative, and maintain just enough progress to keep people invested, but never so much that they no longer need you. In the Machiavellian world, power is not about delivering freedom. It's about managing dreams. You don't need to be the solution. You only need to be the possibility of one. Because as long as people hope, they obey. And as long as they obey, you win. Build your power in private. Announce it in triumph. This Machiavellian principle is rooted in stealth and timing. It warns against showing your hand too early, revealing your ambitions prematurely, or inviting attention before your position is secure. The true strategist knows that power grows best in the shadows, unnoticed, unchallenged, and unbothered. You do your work in silence, your planning in secret, and your moves behind closed doors. Then, when the structure is in place and the outcome is inevitable, you reveal your strength, not as a proposal, but as a fact. Why secrecy? Because growth invites interference. As you rise, others will try to block you, slow you, or steal what you're building. Rivals see potential as threat. Friends may envy your progress. Even well-meaning allies might offer advice or pressure that dilutes your vision. But when you move silently, gathering resources, building alliances, refining your strategy, no one has the chance to stop you. They're still playing yesterday's game while you're preparing to change the board. Machiavelli advised rulers never to let people see them preparing for power. If your ambition is visible too soon, it becomes a target. But if it's hidden, it becomes untraceable. When your rise finally becomes public, it looks sudden, inevitable, even miraculous. Others scramble to understand how you got there. They try to piece together the steps you took. But by then, it's too late. The power is yours, and their only choice is to adapt or be left behind. This principle is used everywhere. In politics, a candidate might quietly build local alliances, secure endorsements, and raise funds behind the scenes. Then, when the momentum is unstoppable, they step forward with full force, declaring not intention, but arrival. In business, entrepreneurs develop their product or strategy in silence. They avoid hype, distractions, or market noise. Then they launch big when the foundations are strong and the results speak louder than promises. Even in social or personal dynamics, this tactic applies. Don't announce your goals before you're ready. Don't share your vision with those who might doubt you, dilute your energy, or derail your progress. Build in private. Study in silence. Let your actions compound behind the scenes. When the time is right, emerge, not seeking approval, but commanding recognition. The announcement must be timed with precision. You don't reveal your power during its construction. You reveal it when it's already functional. When the influence has been earned, the support has been secured, and the outcome is no longer dependent on chance. Your arrival should feel final, like a checkmate, not a move. But be warned. Announcing too often or too early ruins the effect. People stop taking you seriously. Every declaration should feel like a climax, not a preview. You want your emergence to inspire awe, not questions. When you finally speak, it should be to claim power, not to ask for it. In the Machiavellian worldview, silence isn't weakness, it's camouflage. You build without interruption, without interference, and without noise. Then, when the structure is ready, you throw off the curtain. And what was once invisible becomes undeniable. Not a promise, not a plan, just power, fully formed, revealed in triumph. Force a choice where all options benefit you. This is one of the most elegant and manipulative strategies in the Machiavellian playbook, turning every path into a victory, every outcome into a calculated advantage. When you limit people's options to choices you've already shaped, you never lose. You create the illusion of freedom, but the reality is tightly controlled. You let people believe they are deciding their own fate, when in truth they're simply choosing the form of your victory. Machiavelli understood that power is often maintained not by brute force, but by engineering scenarios. If you want someone to comply, resist the temptation to issue commands. Instead, offer them 2 or 3 paths and ensure that each one leads to your desired outcome. When people feel like they've made a choice, they own the decision. They commit to it. They defend it. That's the beauty of this tactic. You hide control behind the illusion of autonomy. Take negotiation as an example. If you're proposing a deal, don't simply demand what you want. Present multiple packages, each one serving your interests in a different way. One might offer short-term gains, another long-term influence. One might seem more generous on the surface, but tie the other party to a contract that ultimately gives you leverage. Whichever they pick, you win. And they leave the table feeling empowered, not coerced. This strategy works equally well in relationships, leadership, and conflict. A leader might offer two difficult paths to a team: take on a tough project with high visibility, or miss the opportunity and risk being overlooked. Either outcome maintains the leader's authority, whether the team rises to the challenge or loses standing. The choice feels open, but it's framed to benefit the one in power. In personal dynamics, this can be used to steer behavior without direct confrontation. Want someone to do something they're resistant to? Offer them a better version of the thing they don't want. For example, would you rather meet today at 3 or tomorrow at 10, instead of asking if they want to meet at all? The choice bypasses resistance. It's not about whether, it's about how. This reframing allows you to maintain control while reducing pushback. The key to this strategy is preparation. You must understand the psychology of the person or group you're dealing with. What motivates them? What do they fear? What will they avoid at all costs? When you know these answers, you design options that feel legitimate, but are quietly rigged to produce outcomes that serve you. It's not deception, it's design. Be careful not to make the manipulation obvious. If people realize that all roads lead to your benefit, they may rebel or refuse to engage. Your options must feel distinct enough to preserve the illusion of choice. Subtlety is your ally. Cloak control in options. Wrap dominance in decisions. In the end, the goal is not to dominate directly. It's to shape the environment so that domination is invisible. People feel empowered, but the architect of every outcome is you. That's how a master of power operates, by never giving an option that doesn't move them forward. When every path leads to advantage, you've already won, before anyone realizes they've started playing. Make others fight your battles. This is one of the most efficient and effective Machiavellian strategies. It saves your resources, protects your reputation, and multiplies your influence without exposing your hands. Why take the risk, the damage, or the scrutiny of open confrontation when you can manipulate others into fighting on your behalf? The real genius lies in shaping the battlefield without stepping onto it yourself. Let others carry your cause, deliver your blows, and take the fall if necessary, while you remain untouched. Machiavelli understood that power is not just about what you can do, but about what you can get others to do for you. When you make someone else believe that your battle is their battle, they will fight with passion, loyalty, and sometimes even more aggression than you would dare to show. You exploit their ego, their fear, their ambition, or their moral outrage, whatever emotional lever works, and channel it toward your goal. This tactic is everywhere. In politics, leaders often use surrogates or supporters to launch attacks on rivals. They publicly stay above the fray while carefully orchestrating narratives through proxies. If backlash comes, they can deny involvement, but if the attack lands successfully, they reap the benefits. The same happens in corporate settings. A powerful executive may have a subordinate question a rival's decision, challenge a competitor's idea, or stir internal division, without ever appearing confrontational themselves. Even in personal relationships, this strategy is used. One person may pit two others against each other to protect themselves or to manipulate outcomes in their favor. By planting subtle doubts, feeding both sides information, or quietly encouraging confrontation, they spark a conflict that advances their interests while preserving their innocence. When done well, they appear uninvolved, sometimes even as the peacemaker in a fire they secretly lit. To execute this strategy effectively, you must master emotional insight. You need to understand what motivates people. Some want justice. Some crave recognition. Others need revenge or validation. Identify what they care about and then show them how fighting your battle fulfills their need. make it feel like their idea. If they believe they are fighting for you, it may work temporarily. But if they believe they are fighting for themselves, they will fight relentlessly. Timing is crucial. You must know when to step back and let the conflict unfold, and when to step in with subtle direction. If you intervene too directly, the illusion shatters. But if you leave things entirely to chance, you lose control. Think of it like puppetry. You're not wrestling in the dirt. You're pulling the strings from the shadows. And remember, those who fight your battles are expendable. They serve a purpose, but they are not the core of your power. Once their usefulness fades, you must be willing to let them go. Protect your image. Maintain your distance. If they fall, you mourn publicly and move on privately. If they win, you praise them generously, while using their victory to climb higher. In the end, making others fight your battles is about conserving energy, managing risk, and multiplying force. You don't need to swing the sword when you can move the minds and emotions of others. True power isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible, and effective. The one who never fights, but always wins, is the one who truly understands control. Reward betrayal when it benefits you. To the average person, betrayal is a moral crime. It's punished, shunned, and remembered with bitterness. But to the Machiavellian mind, betrayal is not about ethics. It's about utility. If someone turns against their former ally, leader, or belief system to serve your interests, they become a weapon. And a good weapon, even if forged in disloyalty, is valuable, so long as it is pointed in the right direction. Machiavelli understood that those who betray often bring more than just their loyalty. They bring inside knowledge, secrets, tactics, and often a deep desire to prove their worth to their new master. This makes them not only useful, but motivated. A traitor is dangerous when they are directionless. But when they are aligned with your goals and rewarded for their betrayal, they become fiercely committed, because now their survival depends on your favor. When someone defects from your enemy and pledges allegiance to you, rewarding them signals two powerful messages. First, it tells others on the opposing side that there is a safe place to land if they switch sides. It creates a pipeline of opportunity. Second, it shows that your leadership is pragmatic and intelligent, that you recognize value over sentiment. You don't cling to personal grudges. You reward effectiveness. Take history as an example. Many rulers and generals, from ancient empires to modern politics, have gained power by welcoming and rewarding turncoats. A disgruntled advisor from a rival faction, when treated well and given a new position, often becomes the fiercest defender of their new allegiance. Why? Because they have something to prove. Their betrayal burns bridges, and they know they cannot return, so they become fully invested in your success. However, you must be careful. Rewarding betrayal only works when it serves a clear, strategic purpose. It should never be indiscriminate. If you reward betrayal that brings no advantage, or if you do it too often, you risk encouraging disloyalty among your own ranks. People may begin to believe that treachery is more profitable than loyalty. That's why the reward must be selective, and the betrayal must produce results. Timing is also critical. You do not reward a traitor immediately. You test them. You observe their motives. You see what they bring to your table: information, influence, or strategic advantage. Once they've proven their usefulness, then you reward them publicly, but modestly. Let others see that loyalty to you pays off, but not so richly that it invites opportunists who would sell anyone for advancement. And always remember, a person who betrays once can betray again. Trust them only to the degree that they remain dependent on you. Keep them close, but not central. Let them serve your interests, but never your secrets. Use them as a tool, not as a cornerstone. Because while betrayal can serve you in the short term, it must always be handled with awareness, not sentiment. In the Machiavellian world, betrayal is not a crime, it's a transaction. And when that transaction works in your favor, you reward it, not because you admire the trader, but because you understand the power of turning enemies into assets. That's not mercy. That's mastery. Pretend to listen. Record what they fear. This is one of the most quietly devastating strategies in the Machiavellian arsenal. Most people think that listening is about empathy or agreement, but for those who seek control, listening is a form of reconnaissance. You're not just hearing someone's words, you're analyzing them. You're studying tone, emotional spikes, subtle hesitations. And most importantly, you're identifying what they fear, because fear is the gateway to influence. When people speak freely, they reveal far more than they intend. In moments of vulnerability, in stories about past failures, or in offhand remarks, they expose the pressure points of their psyche. The fear of abandonment, of being humiliated, of losing relevance, status, or control. These are not always stated outright, but they're present in the background, woven between words. If you learn to listen not just to what people say, but to why they say it, you begin collecting a mental map of their internal battlefield. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of attention earns trust. People like those who listen well. It makes them feel important, heard, safe, and that safety lowers defenses. They share more. They believe you're sympathetic, but you are not listening to validate. You are listening to extract. The more they talk, the more ammunition you gather, not to use immediately, but to store for the perfect moment. When someone fears something, they begin to shape their decisions to avoid it. That's the behavior you want to control. For example, if someone fears being excluded, you know they'll go to great lengths to maintain inclusion. You can use this to pull them in or push them out, depending on whether you need compliance or punishment. If they fear being exposed as incompetent, you can offer selective praise or subtle challenges to keep them in your pocket. Fear makes people predictable, and predictability makes them controllable. This tactic works especially well in power dynamics where open pressure would cause resistance. If you challenge someone directly, they may push back. But if you subtly play to their fears, never overtly threatening, just gently maneuvering, you guide their behavior while keeping your hands clean. You never have to raise your voice. Their own insecurities will do the work for you. The brilliance of this strategy is its invisibility. People think they're confiding in a friend, a mentor, or a neutral observer. They don't realize they're revealing strategic weaknesses. And because you never show your true intentions, they continue talking. They grow dependent on your understanding, not realizing it's being used to build a psychological file that can be opened whenever needed. But never let on that you're calculating. Mirror empathy. Nod at the right moments. Repeat their words back to them just enough to make them feel validated. They must never suspect that their fears are being recorded, let alone studied. And once you have that knowledge, guard it carefully. Deploy it surgically when influence is needed, when leverage must be applied, or when power is on the line. In the Machiavellian mind, listening is not a courtesy, it's a trap. A velvet-lined room where others walk in believing they're safe and leave unaware they've just handed over the keys to their mind. Let others take the fall for your ambition. Machiavelli knew that in the pursuit of power, someone must always bear the cost of advancement, and it should never be you. True strategists build empires while others carry the blame. Whether it's a failed policy, a risky decision, or a ruthless maneuver, the fallout must be absorbed by someone positioned to shield you. An advisor, an assistant, a subordinate, or even a loyal supporter. Ambition is dangerous not because it exists, but because when it's exposed, it invites resistance. But if you succeed while others appear to have made the hard calls, you rise untarnished. People are quick to turn on the ambitious, especially when things go wrong. They respect boldness, but they punish overreach. That's why this tactic is critical. You must separate vision from responsibility. You are the architect of action, but never its executor, at least not in public view. Let others implement the more controversial moves, deliver the unpleasant news, or act on the aggressive plans you orchestrate. If it succeeds, the glory is yours. If it fails, their name takes the hit. This is how many historical rulers maintained their image. They appointed enforcers to carry out unpopular reforms, tax hikes, or crackdowns. When resentment grew, the ruler stepped in, removed the enforcer, and appeared merciful, restoring public favor while never having directly taken the blame. The people remembered the ruler's compassion, not the origin of the policy. Machiavelli endorsed this approach in The Prince, advising that cruelty necessary to stabilize power should be delegated, while rewards should always come from the leader's hand. The same logic plays out in modern power structures. In corporate environments, executives often assign bold, high-risk strategies to managers or department heads. If those strategies succeed, the leader was visionary. If they collapse, the subordinate is dismissed for poor execution. The leader's ambition remains protected, while the fallout is absorbed by the person below them. This tactic also applies in social or political settings. A public figure might have a spokesperson make a controversial statement to test the waters. If the public reacts poorly, the spokesperson is disavowed. If the statement is accepted or admired, the leader clarifies and aligns themselves with it, reaping the benefits without enduring the initial backlash. Either way, the risk is managed, and the true ambition remains shielded. But this strategy requires precision. The person taking the fall must be positioned in such a way that their exit doesn't destabilize your structure. Ideally, they are replaceable, disposable, or already compromised in a way that makes their failure plausible. Their loyalty must be strong or their usefulness already fading. And when the time comes to cut them loose, you must do so with just enough distance to appear reluctantly principled. Never show delight in their downfall. You must express regret. You must look like someone burdened by responsibility. This performance ensures your ambition remains seen as leadership, not self-interest. Because while others fall, you rise, not as a tyrant, but as the one who held things together. In Machiavellian thinking, success isn't just about bold moves, it's about insulation. Others may swing the sword, but you hold the handle, and when the dust settles, only your image remains intact, elevated, unchallenged, untouched. Create a legacy that intimidates even after you're gone. This Machiavellian principle goes beyond the pursuit of power. It aims for immortality in the minds of others. Real power does not end with your presence. It echoes. It lingers in the decisions others make long after you've left the room. Or the throne, a carefully cultivated legacy, becomes a ghost that haunts your enemies, a compass that guides your allies, and a myth that magnifies your name beyond your actual deeds. You become more than a person. You become consequence. Machiavelli understood that ruling is not only about holding power, but about shaping the memory of that power. Fear, respect, and admiration must outlive your command, and this legacy must be carefully designed. It begins with symbolism, your name associated with strength, wisdom, unpredictability, or ruthlessness, depending on the needs of your rule. Then comes action, decisive, unforgettable choices that carve your image into the minds of followers and adversaries alike. The key is consistency of impression. You want to be remembered not for many things, but for one unshakable identity. Whether you are remembered as the just reformer or the feared Iron Hand, you must embody that archetype without exception. It should color every story, every rumor, every tale people tell about you. Once you establish it, guard it like a fortress. Reinforce it with gestures, symbols, and carefully crafted moments that feel legendary. Rulers across history have built legacies that survived their deaths. Julius Caesar shaped Rome not only with policy, but with spectacle and boldness, so much so that even his assassination only amplified his legend. Napoleon's name carried weight in France long after exile. In modern times, corporate empires bear the names of founders who are no longer involved, but whose philosophies and reputations continue to define company culture, investor behavior, and public trust. But intimidation doesn't have to come from brutality. It can come from brilliance, unpredictability, or unwavering principle. What matters is the shadow you cast. People should hesitate before acting against your interests, not because you're present, but because your reputation still commands fear or reverence. It creates doubt. It slows action. It forces people to ask, what would they have done? And more importantly, what will happen if I go against what they built? You can also design your legacy structurally. Embed loyalists into systems, craft laws, or policies that reward your ideals or create institutions that carry your values. Even if someone wants to erase your influence, they'll find it rooted too deeply. Every path leads back to you, and that's the ultimate legacy, one that governs without your presence. To do this well, you must think long-term. Sacrifice short-term praise for lasting myth. Be willing to make unpopular decisions that later generations will understand as necessary. Inspire followers not just to serve you, but to become missionaries of your image. The more they speak your name, the longer your influence survives. When crafted properly, a legacy becomes your most dangerous weapon. You'll no longer need to act. The idea of you will be enough to alter behavior, shift alliances, and dominate conversations. That is not just influence. That is immortality, Machiavelli style. Always look like you're playing fair, even when you aren't. This principle is a masterstroke in the art of manipulation. It allows you to act with ruthless calculation behind a curtain of integrity. While others judge you based on appearance, you execute strategy beneath the surface. The brilliance of this Machiavellian tactic lies in its subtlety. You disarm suspicion by appearing principled, even while you manipulate events to your advantage. In a world where perception often matters more than truth, seeming fair is more valuable than being fair. People want to believe in justice, fairness, and honesty. These ideals provide emotional security and social cohesion. When someone appears to uphold them, they gain automatic trust, admiration, and social protection. The key word here is appear. By maintaining the image of fairness, you avoid scrutiny, minimize backlash, and shield yourself from criticism, even if your actions are entirely self-serving or manipulative. This strategy is used extensively in politics. A leader may manipulate legislation, silence opponents through technicalities, or maneuver behind closed doors. But publicly, they deliver inspiring speeches about unity, transparency, and ethical leadership. Their gestures are symbolic. They hold listening tours, speak of bipartisan cooperation, and reference values they quietly circumvent. Because they look like they're playing fair, most people assume they are. The dissenters are then cast as bitter or paranoid. In corporate environments, the same dynamic unfolds. An executive might cut costs through layoffs while giving a public statement about reshaping the company for long-term employee success. They offer exit packages, organize gratitude ceremonies, and post motivational quotes. The image is carefully constructed. The reality? A cold, calculated consolidation of power and capital. But few challenge it because the leader never seems aggressive. They seem strategic. This tactic also works on smaller scales. In negotiations, for example, you can propose terms that seem balanced on paper but are skewed in your favor. You make small concessions that appear generous while locking in bigger advantages on the back end. If the other party feels respected and heard, they're less likely to question what they gave away. You win by appearing reasonable. The secret is to always maintain plausible deniability. If accused of manipulation, you must have documentation, witnesses, or a calm demeanor that reinforces your fairness. You don't raise your voice. You don't show guilt. You calmly explain your position with a tone of disappointment that someone would question your integrity. This flips the script. Suddenly, the accuser looks ungrateful, emotional, or combative, while you seem composed and rational. But to do this well, you must understand optics. You need to know how your actions will be interpreted, not just what they are. Sometimes, even a fair action can be seen as aggressive if delivered poorly. So craft your messaging. Time your moves. Use soft language. Frame every action as necessary, justified, or regrettably unavoidable. In the end, this philosophy is about control through disguise. You take what you want, bend rules, shift blame, and manipulate outcomes, all while looking like the one who's playing by them. You move with quiet ambition, cloaked in civility. And in a world that punishes open aggression but celebrates polished performance, that disguise makes you untouchable. Turn morality into a spectacle. This Machiavellian principle doesn't ask whether you are moral. It asks whether you appear to be, and more importantly, whether you can use the performance of morality as a weapon. In the theater of public life, be it politics, business, or influence, people are not drawn to quiet virtue. They are drawn to visible righteousness, grand acts of justice, and public displays of compassion or outrage. The more dramatic the gesture, the more power it holds. Morality, when turned into a performance, doesn't just gain approval, it manufactures legitimacy. At its core, this philosophy is about using moral behavior as currency. Quiet ethics are invisible, but public morality, loudly declared and carefully staged, earns trust, followers, media attention, and leverage. It can silence critics, distract from misdeeds, and elevate you above the fray, not because you're cleaner than others, but because you look cleaner. You don't need to be just. You need to look like the embodiment of justice. Machiavelli himself praised the utility of appearing virtuous even when private conduct deviates. He wrote that it is unnecessary to have all the moral qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. Why? Because most people judge based on appearances. And the masses do not dig deeply. A public act of generosity, a donation, a speech about values, a symbolic stand, can outweigh years of quiet scheming if the optics are right. This tactic is evident in political theater. Leaders will take highly public stances on ethical issues, often timed for maximum visibility. They attend vigils, deliver emotional speeches, or a call for reforms during news cycles filled with outrage. These acts may do little to change actual conditions, but they change perception. They signal virtue. And in many cases, they redefine the narrative. Suddenly, they are not part of the problem. They are the brave voice calling it out. In business, corporations engage in moral spectacle constantly. They adopt public social causes, sponsor charities, or change branding during awareness months. These acts are marketed with precision, but behind the scenes, practices may remain unchanged, even harmful. Still, customers and stakeholders are appeased by the spectacle. The illusion of morality buys loyalty. Even in personal or social power plays, this technique applies. If you want to discredit someone, don't argue facts. Stage a moral argument. Frame them as unethical or unjust. Make it a public scene. People rally to what feels right more than what is right. You don't have to prove wrongdoing, you just have to create the appearance of moral failure. But this strategy must be executed carefully. The performance must be convincing. If exposed as a facade, the backlash is severe. Performative morality only works when the audience believes. You must understand the emotions of your crowd, their moral language, and their hunger for heroes. Then you step into that role. You don't just argue for justice, you become justice, in appearance. In Machiavellian terms, morality is not a compass, it's a costume. And when worn well, it gives you not only protection, but influence. People will rally to your banner, echo your message, and fight your battles, not because they understand your strategy, but because they believe in your show. Be ruthless, but never seem it. This principle is the art of controlled cruelty wrapped in charm. Machiavelli warned that while ruthlessness is often necessary to secure power and maintain control, openly displaying it can be dangerous. People will forgive a harsh policy if it appears to come from necessity or a greater good. But if they sense that you enjoy wielding the blade, they'll turn on you. The key, then, is not to avoid ruthlessness. It's to disguise it. In reality, the world is ruled not by kindness, but by decisive action. However, decisive action often comes with a human cost. Jobs lost, alliances broken, enemies silenced, reputations destroyed. The successful leader knows when to cut, and cut deep, but never lets the blood splash onto their public image. You remain composed, even sympathetic. You appear reluctant. You use words like unfortunate, strategic, and necessary. Your actions may be cold, but your demeanor is warm. One historical example is Cesare Borgia, an Italian nobleman and Machiavelli's favorite model of political cunning. Borgia needed to pacify a rebellious region, so he sent in a brutal enforcer, Ramiro de Orco, to use fear and violence. The people were terrified, but order was restored. Then, once Borgia had reaped the benefits, he publicly executed de Orco, blaming him for the excesses. Borgia looked merciful. The blood was on someone else's hands. His ruthlessness had worked, but he didn't carry its stain. This tactic plays out in modern business as well. A CEO may fire hundreds of employees, restructure departments, or eliminate entire divisions to streamline the company and please shareholders. But the public statement will emphasize sustainability, tough but forward-looking decisions, and long-term growth for all stakeholders. The decision is ruthless, but the face of the decision is empathetic, regretful, even inspiring. The anger is softened by the performance. You can even use this approach in personal power dynamics. Ending relationships, shifting loyalties, excluding people from decisions, these moves can be harsh. But if you deliver them with calmness, reason, and the appearance of fairness, most people won't fight back. The sting of ruthlessness is dulled by the silk wrapping. People feel they've been treated reasonably, even if they've just been outmaneuvered. This principle hinges on emotional control. You cannot be reactive. You cannot be visibly vindictive. If you act out of visible rage, jealousy, or ego, your ruthlessness is exposed, and people fear and resent you. But if you act with calm rationale, dressed in diplomacy, people may even respect your hard decisions. They might say, "I don't agree, but I understand." That is a victory. Mastering this tactic also means knowing when to pull back. Not every situation calls for cruelty. Overuse cheapens the illusion. Your ruthlessness must be rare and precise, like a lightning strike, not a storm. And when it happens, others must believe it was inevitable, not personal. In the end, people will often forgive the act if they admire the actor. Be feared in strategy, but trusted in character. That's the paradox Machiavelli understood so well. The most dangerous people are not the loud tyrants. They're the quiet diplomats whose hands are clean, but whose decisions leave no doubt who's in control. Manipulate through gratitude and guilt. This principle is a masterclass in emotional leverage. While force may bring compliance and logic may win arguments, emotional debt is far more binding and far more invisible. Machiavelli understood that power rooted in emotional obligation often runs deeper than fear. People will resist authority, challenge logic, and even walk away from deals. But they will hesitate to betray someone who made them feel grateful or ashamed. Gratitude is one of the most socially powerful emotions. When someone helps us unexpectedly or generously, especially in a time of need, we feel indebted, and that debt doesn't disappear easily. It lingers. It shapes our behavior. We don't want to seem ungrateful, so we reciprocate, even if it costs us. That's where the manipulation begins. You engineer situations where people owe you, and then you collect that debt in subtle but meaningful ways. This doesn't require massive acts of kindness. In fact, the smaller and more personal the gesture, the more effective it becomes. A timely favor, a private show of support, a piece of advice that helps someone save face. These moments may seem inconsequential to outsiders, but to the recipient, they register as moral obligations. And once that bond is formed, you have leverage, not through threat, but through emotion. Guilt is the inverse of gratitude. Where gratitude is tied to receiving, guilt is tied to failing to give back, to disappointing, betraying, or letting someone down. You can use this to reinforce loyalty, discourage rebellion, and control decision-making. A well-timed reminder like, "After everything I've done for you," can neutralize resistance better than a command ever could. It shifts the conversation from logic to emotion, from what's right to what's owed. In leadership, this strategy is subtle but potent. A leader who gives select followers a platform, opportunity, or mentorship can later demand loyalty without ever appearing authoritarian. Those followers feel compelled to protect the one who elevated them. They defend the leader not out of policy agreement, but emotional allegiance. And when someone starts to drift, guilt brings them back in line, softly, effectively. In personal relationships, this tactic is even more common. People use past sacrifices as emotional anchors. "I was there for you when no one else was," becomes a manipulative reminder that creates obligation. It isn't always spoken aloud. Sometimes it's a glance, a pause, a strategically placed silence that forces the other person to reflect on what they owe. And in that silence, decisions are made, not out of desire, but out of guilt. But this strategy requires restraint. If used too obviously, it becomes toxic and loses power. People don't like to feel openly manipulated, so the pressure must be subtle. You must let them convince themselves that they owe you, and let them offer loyalty as if it were their idea. That's how the manipulation stays invisible. Gratitude and guilt are powerful levers. They bypass the intellect and go straight to the heart. And when someone is emotionally entangled, they are less likely to question your motives. They'll follow you, protect you, and obey you, because doing anything else would feel like betrayal, not of a leader, but of a benefactor. And that, in the Machiavellian world, is influence at its finest. Say what they want to hear, then do what you want to do, Yui. This is one of the most effective and timeless tactics of manipulation. People crave reassurance. They want to be told they're right, that their concerns are understood, and that their vision is being followed. The Machiavellian mind understands that aligning with someone verbally costs nothing, but earns trust, buys time, and opens doors. Once inside, your real plans can unfold. Words are cheap, appearances are everything, and actions, once you're in control, can be whatever you choose. Machiavelli emphasized the importance of perception over truth. A leader doesn't have to be virtuous, just appear virtuous. Likewise, you don't have to agree with others. You just have to make them feel like you do. When people believe you're aligned with their desires, they lower their guard. Their suspicion fades. Their resistance dissolves. That's when your true agenda can move forward, often without challenge. This strategy works because people tend to believe what confirms their hopes. If they want change, tell them it's coming. If they want stability, promise it. If they want to feel heard, nod and repeat their own words back to them. Create the illusion of agreement. Once they feel validated, they become compliant, or at the very least, less vigilant. In politics, this is standard practice. Candidates say whatever their audience wants to hear. Promises of reform, protection, unity, or disruption, whatever resonates with the crowd. The real strategy is often hidden beneath the surface. Once elected, the politician acts according to alliances, donors, and long-term goals. The public's desires were a stepping stone, not a destination. In business, this tactic often appears in leadership. A CEO might tell employees their jobs are secure and the company values stability. Internally, layoffs are already scheduled or restructuring is underway. But by saying the right things at the right time, they avoid protest and maintain morale until the real plan is irreversible. Even in personal relationships, this method thrives. A manipulator may tell a partner exactly what they want to hear: commitment, understanding, shared goals, while secretly pursuing their own path. They avoid confrontation by being emotionally fluent, giving just enough to stay trusted while slowly steering the relationship to suit their own interests. The key to success in this tactic is timing and consistency. You must say the right things before opposition forms. You must maintain tone, facial expression, and body language that supports your words. You must avoid sarcasm, contradiction, or signals that reveal disinterest. Your performance must be airtight, because if you're exposed, the betrayal will breed intense backlash. Additionally, your actual actions must be done with subtlety or in stages. If you pivot too hard from what you promised, you'll provoke resistance. But if you change direction gradually, while continuing to reinforce the illusion of alignment, most people won't notice. They'll explain it away. They'll believe you're adapting, not deceiving. Ultimately, this tactic is about buying control with compliance. You trade comfort for influence. You offer words in exchange for access. And once that access is granted, you move, quietly, deliberately, and with your real goal always in mind. It's not deception for the sake of lying. It's strategic speech for the sake of progress. And when done well, no one realizes they've been redirected, only that they willingly followed the wrong path. Exploit the need for belonging to form your army. Human beings are wired to seek connection. At our core, we crave acceptance, identity, and community. This deep emotional need to belong somewhere, to someone, to something, can be manipulated into a powerful engine of loyalty and control. The Machiavellian strategist sees this not as sentiment, but as leverage. If you can create the illusion of tribe, family, or purpose, people will do things for you they'd never do for themselves. They'll follow orders, defend your cause, sacrifice their time, their morals, even their lives, not for a paycheck or promise, but for the feeling of being part of something greater. This is how movements are built. Cults, political parties, inner circles, online followings, they all operate on this principle. The leader doesn't just offer direction, they offer identity. You are one of us now. It's subtle but powerful. When someone feels like they belong, they develop a loyalty that transcends reason. Criticism feels like betrayal. Dissent feels like abandonment. And you, the leader, become more than a figurehead. You become a symbol. To exploit this need effectively, you must first create a structure people want to belong to. It must have the traits of a tribe: shared language, rituals, symbols, enemies, and values. These elements give members a sense of uniqueness. This is our world, and the rest don't understand us. The more exclusive or misunderstood the group appears, the tighter the bond becomes. People don't just join your movement, they become it. You can also reinforce this belonging through personalized validation. Make individuals feel seen. Acknowledge their loyalty. Use phrases like, "people like us," or "you've always been with us." This transforms the relationship from transactional to tribal. The moment someone feels chosen, they'll fight harder to stay chosen. Their identity becomes tied to their membership, and when identity is involved, logic takes a back seat. But the most effective use of this principle comes during times of uncertainty. When the world feels chaotic, people search desperately for belonging. That's your window. Offer clarity, strength, and a sense of direction. Build your narrative around inclusion. We are the ones who will fix this. We protect each other. We are not like the others. Create an in-group and watch as people bond to it, even if your goals are self-serving underneath. Once you've formed this army, you can mobilize it, not through orders, but through suggestion, inspiration, or even implication. You won't need to micromanage. They will enforce the culture themselves. They will silence dissent. They will police loyalty, not because you command it, but because they need to preserve their place in the group. The danger, of course, is that belonging can turn into zealotry. That's why you must maintain boundaries and rotate favors, praise, and proximity. Keep people hungry for your approval. Make them earn their belonging again and again. Gratitude fades, but fear of exclusion does not. In the end, you're not just forming a group, you're forming a weapon. A human network fueled by emotion, belief, and identity. When they feel like they belong to you, they'll protect you at all costs. That's not friendship, that's control. Shape public opinion before it shapes you. This principle is not about truth. It's about narrative. Machiavelli understood that perception is often more powerful than fact. Those who move first to define the narrative hold the advantage. Once public opinion solidifies, reversing it is nearly impossible. Your reputation, your motives, even your identity will be filtered through the lens others have created for you, unless you define yourself first. In any sphere of power, political, corporate, or social, the person who gets ahead of the story wins. You don't wait for others to interpret your actions. You pre-frame them. You set the tone. You decide the context. You tell the public what to think before they have time to decide for themselves. And if you do it well, they'll repeat your version as truth, defend it as their own opinion, and attack anyone who questions it. This is why controlling communication is so critical. Press releases, speeches, social media, interviews, even symbolic gestures all become tools to shape how you're seen. If you're making a controversial decision, frame it as courageous. If you're consolidating power, frame it as necessary reform. If you're removing opposition, frame it as protecting the greater good. Always define your actions with noble intentions, even if the motives are ruthless beneath the surface. Consider political leaders who announce major crackdowns. Before critics can accuse them of authoritarianism, they say, "This is to restore order and protect the people." They offer stories, data, and emotional appeals. And for many, that's enough. The public buys into the framing because they heard it first, and it came wrapped in logic and emotional resonance. By the time dissent arises, the original narrative has taken root. But it's not only about big announcements. Even in small environments, offices, social circles, online platforms, this principle applies. If there's a rumor about you, don't wait. Get ahead of it. Tell your version. Frame it as a misunderstanding. Use humor. Show confidence. Be the narrator, not the subject. When people hear your version first, any other version sounds like gossip or jealousy. This strategy also means anticipating threats. You should always be scanning for how your words, actions, or alliances could be misinterpreted. Preemptively counter them, not with denial, but with redirection. If someone might call you arrogant, frame yourself as decisively confident. If someone might call your ambition dangerous, frame it as a refusal to settle. You don't deny the label, you redefine it. The reason this works is because people are mentally lazy with information. They don't analyze every story they hear. They adopt the most accessible explanation. If your framing is the first, loudest, and most emotionally satisfying, it becomes reality, even if it's fiction. But this requires consistency. Once you start shaping public opinion, you must stick with it. Repetition is crucial. Symbols, phrases, images, repeat them until they become part of your mythos. The more familiar something feels, the more true it seems. Control the conversation long enough, and eventually people stop asking if it's true. They just ask how you pulled it off. Shape the opinion, shape the world. Let others react while you write the script. That's not just communication. That's power. Use time as a weapon. Delay when it hurts them most. In the Machiavellian world, power isn't just about what you do, it's about when you do it. Timing is an instrument of control, and delay, when used strategically, can cripple your opponents, weaken resistance, and tilt the balance of power in your favor. Time becomes a silent blade. While others grow anxious, desperate, or exposed, you wait, calm, calculating, and completely in control of the clock. People are impatient by nature. They want resolution, response, movement. When confronted with conflict, uncertainty, or negotiation, they expect engagement. When you withhold that engagement, when you pause, they begin to unravel. Doubt creeps in. They question their position. They imagine worst-case scenarios. Their urgency turns into vulnerability. And when they break, you step forward, at your pace, on your terms. This tactic works especially well in negotiations. Suppose an opponent makes a demand or an offer. Instead of replying quickly, you delay. You need time to consider. You have other priorities. You want to consult your advisors. That silence, if stretched long enough, becomes pressure. They interpret your delay as strength, indifference, or impending rejection. They begin to compromise, even without hearing your position, just to avoid the discomfort of waiting. The power shifts. In war, diplomacy, or legal maneuvering, time is often used to exhaust the other side. Bureaucracies do this intentionally. Delay a case, extend the process, file motion after motion, not to win the argument, but to wear down the opponent's will. A well-timed delay can turn a strong adversary into a tired one, and a tired adversary makes mistakes. Even in leadership, withholding decisions at key moments can consolidate your control. If your followers or subordinates are divided on an issue, waiting can cause factions to reveal themselves more clearly. While they argue, you observe. While they panic, you prepare. Then, once the dust settles and the weaknesses surface, you act with finality. And they have no choice but to accept your verdict. Not because it was right, but because it was delivered last. Machiavelli advised rulers to act swiftly only when the victory was certain. Otherwise, time was a friend to the cautious. Delay allowed a leader to gather more information, to let enemies expose themselves, and to avoid being dragged into premature commitments. Even in personal relationships or rivalries, silence and delay can make others squirm. If someone expects a reply, especially after conflict, your silence becomes louder than words. They begin to explain, apologize, overcorrect. You didn't threaten them, they threatened themselves in your absence. But to wield delay effectively, you must appear composed. Delay is not avoidance. It's not stalling out of fear. It's an intentional tactic. You must radiate the message. I am not in a hurry because I don't need to be. Your calm unnerves people who are ruled by urgency, and when they act rashly, you gain the advantage. The clock is a tool. Don't always race it. Sometimes the most powerful move is to wait and make them suffer in the silence. Know their weaknesses better than your own. In the Machiavellian playbook, understanding your enemy, or anyone you seek to influence, is more important than self-reflection. While conventional wisdom often preaches knowing yourself, the true strategist obsesses over others, their habits, fears, insecurities, blind spots, and soft targets. Why? Because control doesn't come from strength. It comes from exploiting the vulnerability of others before they know they've exposed it. Weakness is the entry point to influence. It is the crack in the armor that allows your words, your pressure, or your presence to shift behavior without force. If you know where someone is vulnerable, emotionally, socially, financially, psychologically, you don't need to confront them. You just need to nudge them. You can make them feel seen, threatened, flattered, or guilty, whatever your agenda requires. But only if you've studied them with more precision than you study yourself. One of the most effective ways to uncover weakness is observation over time. Listen to how they talk about others. Notice who they defer to, what they complain about, what they joke about. Watch their body language when certain topics arise. Do they shrink when criticized? Do they crave validation? Do they fear irrelevance, betrayal, loneliness, public failure? Everyone has a pressure point. Most have several, and they usually reveal them unconsciously. Another method is through subtle questioning. Machiavellian manipulation relies on what people give away freely. Ask about their childhood. Ask what they would never want to happen. Ask about regrets, rivals, or fears disguised as stories. People are often desperate to be understood, especially if they think you're a safe or admiring listener. Meanwhile, you are cataloging emotional fingerprints. You don't always have to use these weaknesses immediately. In fact, sometimes it's better to store them, like ammunition you might need later. When the moment is right, you can lean on what you know. If they fear failure, you frame your proposal as a safeguard against it. If they fear abandonment, you make loyalty the currency of your alliance. If they want power, you offer proximity to it, just slightly out of reach, to keep them chasing. This approach also protects you from manipulation. If you know their weaknesses and they do not know yours, you are playing chess while they play checkers. You'll anticipate their reactions, bait their responses, and set traps they walk into willingly. And because they feel emotionally entangled, safe, seen, or superior, they won't suspect they're being studied, much less manipulated. But there's a deeper truth here. People rarely change their core vulnerabilities. They dress them up, hide them, deny them, but they don't erase them. That means once you've identified a person's weakness, you hold a kind of permanent key. You can reframe old strategies again and again, adapted to new contexts. One pressure point, many uses. To be clear, this is not about sadism or cruelty. It's about advantage. Machiavelli taught that rulers must do what is necessary, not what is ideal. Knowing your own weaknesses helps you defend. Knowing theirs helps you win. And in the arena of power, the latter always matters more. Offer peace while planning war. This is one of the oldest and most effective Machiavellian strategies because it uses disarming language as a cover for devastating intent. People are most vulnerable not when they are attacked, but when they believe they are safe. That's when their guard lowers. That's when they stop watching your hands, and that is precisely when you strike. To offer peace is to create a sense of calm, cooperation, or closure. It's saying, let's move forward. There's no need for conflict, or we're all on the same side. These phrases put people at ease. They stop defending. They stop questioning. They assume the threat has passed. But while they lean into that illusion of safety, you're watching, preparing, and waiting. This tactic is especially effective when your opponent expects a fight. Perhaps they've challenged you, criticized you, or made an aggressive move. Most people expect retaliation. But when you respond with calm, with understanding, or even with a compliment, they're thrown off. They interpret it as maturity, restraint, or even weakness. They relax. And in that pause, you prepare your offensive, not emotionally, but strategically. Machiavelli often praised those who understood the use of appearances. He wrote, "A prince must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves." Offering peace is the fox's move. It's misdirection. It keeps your true motives hidden behind civility, empathy, or diplomacy. But make no mistake, it is a tactic, not a truce. This principle plays out clearly in politics. Treaties are signed, only to be broken once armies are in position. Opponents are praised publicly while being undermined privately. Peace talks are used as stalling tactics to build strength, move pieces, or gather intelligence. The words may be gentle, but the silence behind them is lethal. In corporate environments, a CEO may reassure the public, the board, or the employees that all is stable, even while planning a merger, a mass layoff, or an executive coup. Those reassurances aren't lies. They're preparation. They give the leader time and space to set the battlefield without suspicion, and when the blow comes, it's too late to resist. Even in personal relationships, this tactic has power. If someone is trying to gain control, they may extend kindness, forgiveness, or cooperation, while quietly gathering leverage. They let the other party believe everything is fine, knowing full well that confrontation or separation is imminent. It's not about deception for cruelty's sake. It's about gaining the advantage without triggering defense. But to execute this strategy well, your timing and tone must be flawless. You can't appear sarcastic, cold, or indifferent. Your offer of peace must seem sincere, authentically calm, even generous. That's what makes the deception work. People must believe you've let go of the fight. Only then will they step into the space you've left open, and only then can you close it behind them. The genius of this philosophy is that it allows you to act without resistance. While others waste energy preparing for the battle they think is over, you prepare for the one they never saw coming. Your enemies don't lose because you were stronger. They lose because you made them think the war had already ended. Keep allies weak but grateful. It sounds cruel. It is, but it's also one of the most enduring principles of power throughout history. Machiavelli believed that loyalty secured through strength alone is brittle, too easily challenged, too easily broken. True control comes from a more subtle dynamic, giving your allies just enough to survive and feel supported, but never enough to become independent. You become the source of their stability, their confidence, their survival. And because of that, they remain loyal, not out of love, but out of need. The logic is simple. An ally who depends on you will never betray you. They might grumble, they might question, but they won't risk severing the relationship. Why? Because they fear what life looks like without you. And if you've managed their growth carefully, if you've fed them wins, validation, or resources in a controlled way, they'll tie their success to your favor. That's not partnership. That's domination disguised as generosity. This dynamic plays out constantly in politics and business. A powerful politician might support a junior ally's rise, but only to a certain level. They'll endorse them, give them some spotlight, let them speak at minor events, even offer them small victories, but they'll never let them accumulate enough influence to stand alone. This keeps the junior dependent, grateful, and ultimately manageable. In business, senior executives often mentor ambitious subordinates with the same playbook. They offer opportunities, just not the ones that lead to true independence. The mentee becomes successful enough to feel supported, maybe even admired, but not so successful that they can walk away or challenge the leader's position. They become an extension of the boss's influence, not a competitor. The trick is balance. If you make someone too weak, they'll feel resentful or humiliated. If you make them too strong, they'll become dangerous. The sweet spot is controlled empowerment. Let them feel progress. Celebrate their wins, especially if those wins come from you. Praise their loyalty, reward their faith, and if they start reaching too high, gently remind them where their power comes from. A small delay, a missed opportunity, a subtle repositioning, enough to keep them grounded. This philosophy also allows you to control the narrative. When your allies are weak but grateful, they'll speak well of you. They'll defend you. They'll echo your values because their identity has been fused with yours. And the more they express gratitude publicly, the more others see you as generous, benevolent, even moral. Meanwhile, you've ensured that their reach never exceeds your own. This strategy also dissuades rebellion. Ambitious allies who feel indebted often hesitate to betray. Why? Because betrayal feels not just risky, but ungrateful. And in most cultures, ingratitude carries social shame. You've trapped them emotionally as well as strategically. Of course, this kind of manipulation must remain hidden. You must never be seen as deliberately limiting someone's growth. Instead, let your constraints appear as circumstances. Budget limits, external forces, tough timing. That way they blame the environment, not you. In the end, you are the hand that feeds, and they will not bite it because you've trained them to believe there's no other source. Keep them weak. Keep them thankful. Keep them yours.